Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Pirates. I have 300 Heroes Heritage. Chapter 1. Sea Circle Calendar. In 1500, West Blue O'Hara Island was gradually reduced to ruins under the roar of artillery fire. Thousands of ordinary people on the entire island, under Marines, justice, no bones left. Only an 8-year-old girl was left behind, carrying the title of Son of the Devil, and the crime of destroying 8 Marine warships, and escaped. In the history of O'Hara, only the embarrassed little footprints are left. What no one knew was that on that night, an icy blue meteor streaked across the dark starry sky and fell to the ground. Day 2. East Blue, Seymour Jaji Village. The orange-red sunlight slowly rises from the sea of East Blue as if it has just taken a bath from the East Blue. The morning wind blew across the sea, swept up layers of ripples, and the orange-red sunlight jumped between the waves of the sea, awakening the entire Seymour Jaji village. On the quiet stone pavement, I occasionally think of a few roosters. Slowly, the roofs of people's houses next to the bluestone path began to rise one after another. The whole Seymour Jaji village gradually became lively. At the same time, the largest kendo in Seymour Jaji village was present, and the door of Ishin Dojo slowly opened. The figure of a squinting youth wearing round-rimmed glasses came out from the morning sunlight. After a long stretch of his body that he had just woken up from, Koshiro's squinting eyes under the lens were slightly bent, indicating that the master was in a good mood at this time. "Oh, the weather is good today. Those stinky boys should come to the dojo in a while, right? Well, decided to clean up first, Koshiro, who was talking to himself, was taken aback for a moment. As far as I could see, not far from the gate of the dojo, a water-blue baby swaddle was lying there quietly. Without thinking much, Koshiro, who was slightly stunned, quickly put down the broom he just picked up, ran to the swaddling clothes in 3 steps and 2 steps quickly, crouched down and picked up the swaddling clothes lying on the ground. There's actually a baby inside. Koshiro recognized at the moment he picked up the swaddle. I don't know who is so mad, putting such a small baby on such a cold road, and I don't know if the child is okay. While complaining about the person who left the child, Koshiro opened the swaddle and saw a sleeping baby boy. Looking at the baby boy who didn't look any different, Koshiro was obviously relieved. "You little guy is lucky, hey." As he was talking, Koshiro suddenly noticed something next to the baby boy's small arm in the swaddling. Koshiro stretched out his hand curiously and gently took it out from under the baby boy's lotus root-like arm. Looking closely, it was actually a piece of blue jade the size of a goose egg. Inside the jade, there were 2 large characters that seemed to be formed naturally. "Zanu, it seems that the back of your little guy is not simple. However, we will talk about this later, so from today onwards, you will be called Zanu." As he spoke, Koshiro looked at the swaddling baby boy. "No, maybe it should be called Zanu now." Koshiro's squinting eyes were even more crooked. "Zanu, in the future, you will definitely be the best person to inherit my kendo." At this moment, a small child with navy blue hair who looked at most about 2 years old walked out of the dojo. When he saw the baby in Koshiro's arms, a surprised smile appeared on his face. Trotted in front of Koshiro, the little girl thought hard about her feet, as if she wanted to see the baby in her father's arms, and said excitedly at the same time, "Father, this is..." Seeing Kuina's eager little eyes, Koshiro crouched down with a smile, handed the infant Zanu to Kuina's little hand, and said with a smile, "Kuina, Zanu will be your younger brother from now on, be sure to take good care of your younger brother." Kuina looked at the happy smile on her father's face that she had never seen before, and was stunned for a moment. Then she didn't think much, and also looked at the baby in her arms with happy eyes. Violently nodded his little head, his cute little face was full of serious expressions, and he assured, "Yes, father, I will definitely take good care of my brother." Then he looked down at the little baby in the swaddle in his hand, and muttered, "Zanu, In the swaddle, the little baby seemed to feel Kuina's assurance in his sleep, with a lovely smile on his white and tender face. In the blink of an eye, nearly 10 years passed in a flash. In the Ishin Dojo, many people are training with bamboo swords sweating like rain. There are adults, there are children, and even the uncle of the security officer in the village is training hard in the dojo. This world is not safe. Above the sea, pirates are rampant. There is no harm in learning a little more life-saving skills. At this time, Koshiro was dressed as he was 10 years ago, wearing a suit of kendo field, squinting his eyes and hanging a pair of large round glasses, kneeling on the wooden steps, smiling and looking at the kendo field and tense training situation. It's just that compared to 10 years ago, at this time Koshiro, a wrinkle has unknowingly climbed on his forehead. Compared to 10 years ago, at this time, Koshiro had a wrinkle on his forehead unknowingly. At this moment, a shout instantly attracted the attention of everyone in the dojo. Kuina, I'm going to challenge you. I won't lose this time. Listening to this familiar word, the others who were training happily stopped their training and looked in the direction from which the voice came. Then I saw an 8-year-old boy with a green algae head, holding 2 bamboo knives in both hands, and loudly declared to Kuina, who was already slim at this time. They couldn't help but gather together as if watching a good show, and joked with kindness. Yo, Zoro is here to challenge Kuina again today. Counting this time today, how many times has Zoro challenged? More than 1,500. Or more than 1,600. Zoro, do your best today, you can definitely beat Kuina. Ha ha ha. Hearing the ridicule of the brothers around, Zoro, holding the bamboo sword in both hands, roared at them angrily. No road race. It must be me who will win today. I'm the man who wants to become the world's greatest swordsman. However, Zoro's roar didn't get everyone's approval, and everyone laughed even more. Humph. Seeing that the surrounding senior brothers didn't believe what he said, Zoro snorted angrily, and then ignored these people, but turned his eyes to the girl in front of him, revealing unprecedented persistence in his eyes. As the challenge party, Kuina held her forehead helplessly, looked at the little Zoro in front of her speechlessly, said speechlessly. Hey, this is the 1825th challenge to me since you joined the gym. You were the loser in the previous challenge. However, you came here to play in the gym 2 years ago, and you were defeated by that guy Zanu. Why didn't you challenge him, but ran over to challenge me? Did that guy give you some ecstasy soup? Hearing Kuina's words, a figure instantly appeared in Zoro's mind. With long sky blue hair, ruby red eyes, and always neat and clean clothes, the already slender figure is perfectly set off. This is a boy who is more aristocratic than a true world aristocrat. This is the common evaluation of everyone in the dojo for Koshiro's adopted son, Kuina's younger brother, and everyone's senior brother. Returning to his senses, Zoro shouted to Kuina. Stop talking. That guy Zanu said that you are the only one who can defeat him. If I can defeat you, it means that I also have the strength to defeat that guy Zanu. You are all blocking the way for me to realize my ambition, so before I become the world's greatest swordsman, I must defeat you, Kuina. Accept my challenge. With that said, Zoro is ready to fight. Seeing this, Kuina raised her eyebrows, and then said viciously. So that guy Zanu gave me the trouble. It's a stinky brother. After speaking, Kuina put away her helpless expression, held a bamboo knife in both hands, and also assumed a fighting stance. Her cute little face was also full of serious expression, and she stared at Zoro on the opposite side, saying, although I'm a little unhappy with that stinky brother's behavior of throwing the blame, but it is also my dream to become the world's largest swordsman. Only in this regard, I will never give in easily. So, Zoro, prepare to fail your 1825th challenge. Hearing this, Zoro roared in dissatisfaction. Long-winded, I must win this time. After that, Zoro rushed towards Kuina. The two soon fought once, and the gymnasium instantly remembered the sound of dense bamboo swords crashing. Snapped, 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 quote. The apprentices around the theater were also discussing with great interest at this time. Hey, you say, how many moves Zoro can hold in Kuina's hands this time? I guess I can hold on to at least 50 moves. After all, Zoro's monster-like strength, we are only masters in the entire gym, Kuina and Zanu can easily block it, we can't beat this little guy at all. Well, I think it's the same, but then again, Brother Zanu's kendo qualifications are really enviable. I don't see Brother Zanu training on weekdays. In the case of practicing the piano in the forest, only the master and Kuina in the entire gym can defeat the little brother Zanu, which is a terrible qualification. Yeah, but unfortunately, Brother Zanu seems to like music more and doesn't work much in kendo, otherwise, even Miss Kuina, who is the same genius in kendo, might not be a match for brother Zanu. Well, yes, I think so too, what a pity. Quote. The surrounding discussions also reached the ears of Koshiro, who was sitting on his knees and was also paying attention to this challenge. Also remembering the boy who looked like a noble boy, Koshiro's face involuntarily showed a proud look, but then he seemed to think of something, and he couldn't help shaking his head and smiled bitterly. At this moment, the door of the dojo was slowly pushed open, and a slender figure walked in with a violin case on his back. In an instant, the eyes of everyone in the dojo involuntarily turned towards the figure who walked in. Some people are born destined to emit dazzling light, all the time and unconsciously, attracting everyone's attention. The young man who walked in was most notable for his ruby red eyes and his long sky blue hair that day. It's just that today, the boy's long sky blue hair is tied up at the back of his head, he is wearing a small wine red suit, wearing pure white short sleeves, a dark blue handkerchief around his neck, and a slender and neat lower body, black trousers. Coupled with the violin case on his back, the whole person exudes a literary temperament. He is exactly the master of the dojo that everyone talked about just now, Zanu. With a gentle smile on his face, Zanu walked in from the gate. Along the way, as Zanu approached, everyone's voices gradually became smaller unconsciously, and finally stopped talking and watched Zanu walk towards Koshiro. Everyone unconsciously set aside for Zanu a road. They, like soldiers and subjects standing on both sides, watched the king leave. Although Zanu smiled at them during the process, they still dared not make any presumptuous actions. Zanu seems to be used to their attitude and eyes, and doesn't care much. Going straight to Koshiro, Zanu bowed slightly to say hello. Master. Koshiro looked at this one who was raised by himself, and was full of emotion in his heart. Whether it is talent, strength, temperament or temperament, they are so perfect that they can't pick out any faults. Looking back on all the experiences in most of my life, I found that no one can compare with it. This young man in front of him is simply a truly perfect person. As for the words of other apprentices in the dojo, such as, wasting kendo talent, and, strength below Kuina, Koshiro just laughed. Waste kendo talent, strength under Kuina, Koshiro wouldn't believe it himself if he hadn't seen the young man in front of him, searching for inspiration, with his own eyes, how amazing and brilliant the young man in front of him is. And now, even Koshiro himself doesn't know how strong the young man in front of him is. Regarding Zanu's greetings, Koshiro squinted, smiled and nodded, then looked at the time and asked in surprise. Why did you come back so early today? Zanu has always held an attitude of gratitude and respect towards Koshiro, so when he heard Koshiro's question, Zanu didn't hide anything and replied directly. My strength has reached a bottleneck, and I can't increase my training outside, so I came back. Strength has reached the bottleneck. Koshiro looked at Zanu thoughtfully, then nodded, as if he understood something. Said, is that so? When Koshiro was about to say something. Bang! A loud noise came, and everyone's eyes couldn't help but follow the sound. Just when I saw Zoro slam to the ground, the two bamboo knives in his hand were smashed to the side. Zoro touched the buttocks that seemed to be broken into 8 pieces, looked at Kuina with dissatisfaction and said loudly. Next time I will definitely beat you. When Kuina was about to say something, she noticed the extra figure in the dojo, so she ignored Zoro and walked towards Zanu angrily. Coming to Zanu's side, Kuina approached Zanu's cheek with a puffy face and said viciously. Good, you stinky brother. You made Zoro target me and challenge me every day. This is the 1826th time. Where is your conscience? Will it not hurt? Is there such a fool as you are? Seeing the little face getting closer and closer to me, when it was almost sticking face to face. Zanu suddenly stretched out his hand, stroked Kuina's little head gently, and smiled. Isn't that Kuina? You are more powerful than me. Let junior brother Zoro aim at the strong and keep going. This is for junior brother Zoro. Besides, fighting often is also beneficial to improving your swordsmanship, Kuina, isn't it? Call my sister. Kuina subconsciously retorted, and only then did he notice that Zanu was touching his head like a child, jumping back and escaping Zanu's magic claws, and then looked at Zan humbly. You, Dao. HMPH, I'll make excuses. He said so in his mouth, but in reality, as Zanu said, his swordsmanship has indeed improved a lot in battles. But Kuina will never admit it. Especially in front of this stinky brother. She must maintain the majesty that her elder sister should have. So Shui Lingling's big eyes turned, and he directly changed the topic and said, "Stinky brother, your kendo talent is so good, why don't you work hard? Don't you want to be a world-famous great swordsman at all?" Zanu smiled, a strange smile appeared in his ruby-red eyes, and said with a smile, "Isn't there Kuina you? In the future, when you become the world's greatest swordsman, wouldn't it be enough to protect me? Who made you so powerful, Kuina?" After speaking, without waiting for what Kuina was saying, he continued, "Okay Kuina, I'm going to take a shower. The sweat all over my body may really become smelly after a while." After saying that, he turned around and nodded to Koshiro, then walked to the lounge at the back. Until then, Kuina hummed unhappily, "I want to call my sister. Really?" After that, he turned around and started training again. Regarding the friendly exchange between Kuina and Zanu, Koshiro sat on his knees with a smile on his face, and made no comments. Even, for this scene, Koshiro is very happy to see it happen. After all, no one knows better than himself how excellent this young man looks like. If Zanu can walk with his daughter Kuina in the future, he, as a father, will really wake up with a smile every day. After all, fat water doesn't flow to outsiders' fields. In addition, Kuina and Zanu grew up together since childhood, and this layer of childhood sweetheart relationship. Koshiro actually thinks there is still a high possibility of this happening. Not to mention Koshiro's dirty thoughts in his squinting heart, the dojo at this time returned to its previous state of lively sword training with Zanu's departure. However, the topic of communication among the apprentices in the dojo gradually became Zanu. Brother Zanu is worthy of being the face of our Seymour Jaji village. He looks even more handsome today. Yeah, I don't know if the little girls in the village know that the Prince Charming, Zanu, who they have been thinking about, has returned so early today. Will they be sad and cry when they wait on the road in vain in the evening? Ha ha ha. Quote, "Hey, don't talk about those who don't have some. Have you noticed that little brother Zanu's aura is so strong?" That's right. Brother Zanu just walked by as usual, but every time I face Brother Zanu, my body can't help but become restrained. It's so weird. That's right. Actually, I think that Zanu is more like a king than a nobleman. Yeah, he wants to be an emperor. A real emperor. Emperor, really or not, I'm afraid you haven't even seen the king of the most famous Goya kingdom in our East Blue. What are you talking about here? Go. Who says I haven't seen it? At this time, Zoro, the green algae head, picked up the bamboo sword that fell on the ground again, and started training frantically. However, once again feeling the temperament from Zanu, Zoro couldn't help thinking. Is that man really weaker than Kuina? The same question is exactly what Kuina is thinking about at this time. But thinking about the several battles between Zanu and himself in the past, after each battle, Zanu's panting and embarrassed appearance couldn't be faked at all. Humph, I will definitely become the world's greatest swordsman. Kuina's eyes narrowed, and the movement of waving the bamboo knife was even sharper. Women are inherently weaker than men, and their physical fitness is destined for women to be unable to become great swordsmen. However, his father's words came to mind once again, making Kuina's heart weigh a big mountain. At the same time, recalling the previous battle with Zoro, and clearly feeling Zoro's terrifying progress, Kuina clenched the bamboo sword's hands unknowingly, and her little face was full of unwillingness. No, I will never give up my goal of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. Now, this is not only my dream, but I also want to protect that stinky brother. Since the stinky brother doesn't like kendo, then his safety will be guarded by my elder sister. Only by becoming the world's #1 swordsman will I be able to protect my stinky brother, let him study music carefree and pursue his dreams. Only this point, I will never give up. On the other side, Zanu was already lying comfortably in the open-air bath, with his back against the smooth marble, completely relaxed. Looking up at the same sky as in the previous life, he muttered. Unconsciously, it's been almost 10 years since I came to this world. I don't know where this is in this world. Where is Robin now? Yes, Zanu is not actually from this world. In his previous life, he was an orphan, also because of his long sky blue hair and ruby red pupils, he has been scorned since he was a child. He was precocious and began to despair of that world. Until later, he accidentally saw the anime, One Piece, on TV on the street, and saw the little girl in the anime who had an amazingly similar life experience to himself, Nicole. Robin. After experiencing despair again and again, after the story of stubbornly living for the dream, Zanu in the previous life has renewed hope for life. Ignoring the strange eyes of people around him, Zanu gradually became a child of others and a musical genius through unremitting efforts. At the age of 16, he became a peerless genius of the Capital Conservatory of Music, a grandmaster of various musical instruments. Coupled with the aristocratic temperament that gradually revealed on his body, Zanu in his previous life became the Prince Charming of the entire music industry in one fell swoop, and was sought after by countless people. However, only Zanu's dormitory close friends know that Prince Charming, who shocked the entire music industry, has an unknown past and an anime avatar that he has always loved. Later, after swiping Robin in One Piece from his mobile phone again, Zanu fell asleep, but after waking up, he realized that he had become a baby and came to the real, One Piece, world. At the same time, what surprised him even more was that Zanu found a system called 300 Heroes Inheritance bound in his mind. Zanu knew that he also came with cheat. And the girl in my memory, Nicole Robin, let him protect her this time. However, on the vast ocean, finding a person is no different from finding a needle, and it is equally as difficult as reaching the sky. In addition, Robin's ability to hide from childhood in order to survive in memory made Zanu's plan to find someone even more difficult, and finally he had to give up the plan to go to sea immediately. Zanu plans to wait a few years before Robin arrives at Alabasta before heading out to sea again. This matter can't be rushed. Zanu, who was lying in the open-air bath, muttered to himself, then stretched out his hand and picked up a piece of jade hanging on his chest. Through the sunlight, the word, Zanu, is particularly dazzling in the jade. Zanu's expression is a bit complicated. However, what happened to this jade? In the last life, this was the only thing that stayed with me after I was born. I thought it was proof of my life experience in the last life. I just didn't expect it to come to this world with me. What the hell is this? For a time, various thoughts appeared in Zanu's mind. While Zanu was thinking about it, a mechanical sound suddenly came from his mind, interrupting Zanu's thinking. Remind host, according to the agreement, the 10-year deadline is approaching, and you need to find the first inheritor. Listening to the urging system voices in his mind these days, Zanu came back to his senses and answered again helplessly. Don't worry, I won't break my promise. This is the third time the system has urged today. The system in Zanu's mind is called the 300 Heroes Inheritance System, which has been bound since he first came to this world nearly 10 years ago. As the name suggests, this system has a legacy left by 300 heroes. And the 300 heroes themselves are from different worlds. In the system, the higher the hero ranking, the stronger the inheritance. However, before these inheritances met the inheritors, even Zanu himself could not know the specific identities and rankings of these heroes. However, unlike other systems in previous web articles, the system Zanu is bound to has no so-called tasks. At the same time, there is no so-called master-servant relationship between Zanu and the system, but a similar cooperation relationship. Zanu needs to find a successor for the system in the whole world, at least one every 10 years. Zanu, the system host, can enjoy a free hero inheritance. At the same time, after finding 5 inheritors, he will get another inheritance opportunity. That is to say, Zanu can accept inheritance multiple times, but other inheritors can only accept it at most once. It is worth mentioning that the so-called inheritance does not directly accept all the power from the inheritance hero, but turns all the abilities of the inheritance hero into seeds and integrates them into the body of the inheritor. As for the ability seeds in the body to fully bloom, most of them require the step-by-step training of the inheritors before they can accept the fusion. But there are also a small number of special ones, because of the inheritance hero's character, or strength, or some other factors. If you want to really get what abilities, you need some special means. As for how to select the inheritor, the system does not give a specific method, but only says that when the icon of the inheriting hero in the system lights up, it means that the inheritor of the hero has appeared. At the same time, the system will also give a specific location, then Zanu needs to find it. The detection range of the system is only 100 nautical miles. And Zanu, the inheritance accepted for the first time, is the Queen of Ice from the world of Zanmei, Ace Day. Hero ranking 261. Zanu said. System, open the personal panel. As Zanu's voice fell, a virtual panel that only Zanu could see appeared in front of him. Host, Zanu. Age, 9, already, 10. Heritage Heroes. Ice Queen, Acedes. Hero ranking, 261st. Ability, 1. The Power of Ice, the Essence of Demons, Skill Inheritance, 100%. Second, Sword Skills, Great Swordsman Swordsmanship, Skill Inheritance, 100%. Third, Practical Experience, Skill Inheritance, 100%. Fourth, Torture Skills, Skill Inheritance, 0%. Hero Inheritance, 80%. Strength, equivalent to Marine Admiral Strength. Quote. At the bottom of these introductions, there is a line of congratulations from the system. Congratulations, host, it took less than 10 years to have an admiral of headquarters level combat power. When Zanu saw the system's suggestion, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he scolded softly. If this guy becomes a real businessman, he will definitely be the least attentive one. Ha ha ha. After laughing and teasing the system, Zanu abruptly stood up from the open-air bath. Countless crystal water droplets slowly flowed down Zanu's slender body, and the warm sunlight reflected on the way, illuminating Zanu's 8 faint abdominal muscles. On Zanu's left middle finger, he wears a white star ring, which is as bright as a pure jade ring. The word 0 is even more noticeable. However, Zanu at this time was obviously not thinking about these things. The first inheritor. As Zanu walked out of the bath and wiped his body, he looked at the 300 Heritage Heroes group given by the system in his mind at this time, a hero ranking above the Ace Day Heritage he accepted once again, flickering. But it only flickered 10 times and then went out again. Oh, it flashed 10 times this time. And it's more dazzling than the previous few times. It seems that something has changed in Kuina's heart. Yes, Zanu is not in a hurry because the 10-year contract with the system is so close, it is because he has already locked down the first target. And the inheritance pattern in the system started to flicker a year ago, and until today, not only has it flickered more often than ever, but also more dazzling than ever. It seems that Kuina is only one last step away from fully awakening the inheritance. Then let me help you this time, Kuina, sister. If Kuina knew that her stinky brother actually called her sister, in her heart, she would be shocked, right? You know, in the past, no matter what the circumstances, Zanu, the stinky brother, who was 2 years younger than her, always treated her like taking care of her younger sister. In the eyes of some uninformed people, Zanu is like a brother in terms of height and behavior, so there are often some words, Kuina really has a good brother, into Kuina's ears. Kuina often gets gassy because of this. I always feel that my majesty as a sister Sama has been seriously lost. This is why he always emphasizes, to be called sister, in front of Zanu. Thinking of the girl who always cared about the title of sister, Zanu couldn't help but put on a warm smile. At this time, Zanu had put on a neat set of clothes again. The upper body is a white shirt, and the lower body is also new snow-white suit pants. The outermost is a white trench coat with red trim, under the breeze, a few pink sakura flowers blow. The hem of his clothes and Zanu's long sky blue hair fluttered together. Zanu looked up and saw the sun in the sky above his head. Count the time, Kuina, Zoro and the others are almost at noon break. It looks like it's time to prepare some refreshments. While talking to himself, Zanu left the bath and walked towards the kitchen. After a few minutes, Zanu walked into the dojo with a large ceramic plate containing a plate of desserts, a pot of tea and 3 teacups, and went straight to Koshiro. Putting down the ceramic plate in his hand, Zanu lifted the teapot and poured tea trees into the 3 teacups. Master, please. Koshiro took the tea, looked at the time, and smiled at Zanu, who was sitting beside him watching Kuina training in the dojo, saying, Hey, I didn't expect it to be noon. At this time, Zanu, who was still watching Kuina's training, suddenly said, Master, I wonder if you have time to fight with me. When Koshiro heard Zanu's words, he didn't have any surprises, as if he had known it for a long time. After taking a sip of tea, Koshiro said, your strength has reached a bottleneck. Do you want to break through the bottleneck through fierce battles? Zanu nodded, but what he didn't say is that this time, it is also to help Kuina completely light up the inheritance. Seeing Zanu nodding, Koshiro laughed and said, Speaking, Zanu, your kendo talent is really the best I've ever seen in my life. 2 years ago, at the age of 8, you were able to hear the breath of all things. I haven't played against each other for 2 years. Even I don't know how far you have grown. Even so, there was no anger or jealousy on Koshiro's face, but instead a look of pride and pride. Masters don't have to be self-effacing, and, masters, will always be Zanu's masters, this will not change. Zanu said seriously. Hearing this, the squinting Koshiro's smiling face showed a hint of relief. Then he taught, Zanu, you are very good in all aspects, even in terms of strength, even I can't see through. However, as a master, I still have to say something. As a swordsman, sometimes, you need a pure and indomitable mind. Although I don't know the reason, I can still see that there are too many things in your heart. However, with your character, I won't advise you to put all of these down. If you want to pursue the real peak of kendo, let them be the driving force for your growth. The real top swordsman has the power to cut everything, but at the same time he has something that he can never cut. Possessing the power to sever everything, but at the same time has something that he can never sever, right? Zanu pondered silently. Although he has truly inherited all the strengths of Ace Day, and is also a real great swordsman, if he really talks about the perception of the way of the sword, he is still far behind. And this gap is not in talent, but in the accumulation of long years. Koshiro on the side looked at Zanu's thoughtful appearance and couldn't help but smile. He knew that Zanu would definitely understand the meaning of his words, and this time would not be long. In this regard, Koshiro is convinced. Afterwards, Koshiro stood up, ignoring Zanu who was thinking, and shouted to the other apprentices in the kendo hall who were still training intensely. Okay, let's go here this morning, everyone go back to rest. Hearing Koshiro's voice, the apprentices stopped, turned around and bowed slightly to Koshiro, and then walked out while talking. Goodbye teacher. Today's time flies so fast. I'm working hard. I didn't expect the morning time to end. Hey, I'm not telling you guys, I feel like I've made a lot of progress. From this point of view, it won't be long before I can become a legendary swordsman. Wake up, it's not dark. Goodbye, brother Zanu. Quote. A faint smile appeared on Zanu's face again, and he nodded to several people. At this time, Koshiro also turned around and walked towards the back of the gym. Just when everyone was almost gone, a series of beating sounds sounded again in the dojo. Snapped. Quote. Zanu heard the sound and looked, and sure enough, he saw Kuina and Zoro, still holding bamboo swords, attacking the dummies in the gym frantically. Zanu could not help but say hello. Kuina, Zoro, come and take a break with a glass of water. However, the moment Zanu's voice fell, he was met with 2 firm rejections. Call my sister. Do not want. Zanu smiled helplessly. At this moment, Zanu heard footsteps behind him. Turning his head to look, he saw Koshiro walking over with 2 daggers in his hands. Zanu, shall we go? Zanu nodded, but then turned to look at Kuina, who was madly slashing at the dummy with sweat on his cheeks. Zanu turned his head and apologized to Koshiro. Sorry, can you wait a moment, teacher, and I'll bring some water to Kuina. Hearing this, Koshiro, who was squinting, was taken aback for a moment, and then he also looked at Kuina, who was still training. Even when he saw the sweat, his whole body was almost soaked with sweat, and even Koshiro could faintly see Kuina's slightly trembling arm. At the same time that he couldn't bear it, Koshiro also showed a look of pity on his face. Obviously possessing extraordinary talent, possessing unbearable persistence for ordinary people, possessing love and sincerity for kendo, but as a daughter, she is destined to not go very far in kendo. Kendo is so cruel. Koshiro nodded at Zanu, then turned around and waited for Zanu. And this, isn't it unbearable for his own daughter? Zanu got Koshiro's permission and walked towards Kuina with the tray. Her face was covered in sweat, but she still refused to admit defeat. Kuina, who was exercising frantically, heard the familiar footsteps behind her, and she already knew that it was her stinky brother coming over. However, Kuina did not stop training, and still swung the knife quickly. Zanu came to Kuina with the tray, bent down and put down the tray, picked up a glass of water, and said jokingly, "Kuina, if you keep practicing like this without resting, maybe your dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman is about to cry. Call my sister." Kuina couldn't help but subconsciously stopped swinging the knife, turned her head and retorted loudly at Zanu. "Also, what nonsense are you talking about? My dream must always be a smile." "Absolutely." However, Zanu still smiled and said, "But if you don't give your body a break, maybe the muscles will gradually break down." Hearing that, Kuina was about to swing the knife for a while. However, Zanu's words did not stop and continued. "Actually, a broken muscle is a good thing. More importantly, if the meridian is injured, Kuina may not be able to hold a knife with both hands in the future. Call my sister." Kuina was clearly taken aback by Zanu's words, and even the familiar retort was much quieter. However, Zanu still smiled and said at this time, "This is not the end. If it is more serious, maybe the blood pressure will be supplied to the nerves of the human body, and there is a possibility of becoming a vegetative person at that time." Kuina shuddered all over, threw down the bamboo sword in his hand, turned to look at Zanu hatefully, and said, "Zanu, you stinky brother, are you the devil?" Saying that, he grabbed the water glass from Zanu's hand and sat down directly while drinking tea. Seeing this, Zanu smiled. Then, as if he had just thought of something, he shouted to Zoro, who was eavesdropping on his ears while training. "Oh, yes, and Zoro, you too." However, Zoro, looking clearly not to believe Zanu's nonsense, shouted, "Stop chattering." Having said that, Zoro stopped the return movement in his hand, walked straight to Zanu, picked up another glass of water in the tray, and poured it with his head up. After drinking, Zoro looked at Zanu and Kuina and said, "Don't get me wrong, I'm just a little thirsty." After he finished speaking, he turned around, returned to the place where he trained before, picked up 2 bamboo swords and started training again. However, whether it is Zanu or Kuina, it can be clearly seen that Zoro's sword-wielding movement has eased countless times compared to before. This guy is really dishonest. Kuina pouted. Zanu also smiled, not paying much attention. Afterwards, Zanu glanced at Kuina, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, then he turned around and walked towards Koshiro. At the same time, while walking, he said, "Master, let's go." Zanu's voice was not loud, as if to remind Koshiro. But Zanu's words just fell into Kuina's ears. Hearing Zanu's words, Kuina, who was sitting down to rest, couldn't help looking up at the door, just to see his father holding 2 daggers in his hand. Zanu stepped forward and took one of the daggers from his father, and then the two walked towards the door of the gym. This scene fell in Kuina's eyes, which aroused the little girl's curiosity. Father and stinky brother, what are they going to do? Could it be that the father wants to teach his stinky brother a lesson? Let him let go of his musical dreams and concentrate on learning kendo. Thinking of this, Kuina frowned cutely, and then secretly denied. "No, according to my father's love for my stinky brother, I shouldn't stop my brother's dream." Then what are they going to do? After thinking about it, Kuina's brows furrowed even tighter, but the next second, Shui Lingling's big eyes turned, and there was a hint of slyness in her eyes. Immediately after that, he turned over and stood up and ran towards the door. At the same time, I did not forget to shout at Zoro, who was still training. "Zoro, I'll leave you a guarding gym today, come on." After shouting, Kuina ran out of the gate. Only the little green algae head Zoro was left. Looking at the empty gym, he shouted in a loud voice, "How can it be repaired?" Kuina, who ran out, looked at Zanu and Koshiro, who were already walking towards the deep mountain, and quickly hid behind a big tree. After taking a deep breath, he cautiously stuck out his small head, looked at the backs of the two who were walking away, and whispered, "HMPH, I'll follow you secretly to see what the hell you're going to do." Saying that, he followed quietly with small steps. However, after half an hour, Kuina, who had followed the two to the depths of the mountain where he had never been in the future, couldn't help but breathe a little. At the same time, he became more curious about the purpose of his father and brother's trip. Just like that, after following another half an hour, the three came directly to the other side of the mountain. At this time, Kuina was completely shocked. Especially looking at the scene like a natural disaster in the distance, Kuina couldn't close her mouth in shock. In the distance, according to the surrounding mountains, there should have disappeared a mountain peak of several thousand meters high, as if it was cut directly from the mountain by a sword. On the ground that was cut out with an area of nearly a square, huge slash marks crisscrossed the whole piece of the earth. Even the surrounding forests outside the perimeter, the giant trees that were several hundred meters thick were chopped down into countless sections lying in the woods. There are no less than 10,000 knife marks on each section of the trunk. And on the farther beach, where is a column-shaped mountain that is just 1,000 meters high standing strangely. Kuina can be sure that this place is definitely a training place for a peerless swordsman who has never been born. Moreover, this swordsman has definitely reached the level of a great swordsman. It turns out that there are really swordsmen who can do this. It seems that the master brought his stinky brother here to visit the great swordsman today. Just as Kuina was thinking about it, she saw her father and stinky brother actually walking towards the opposite sides of the shattered ground. Moreover, looking at the posture, where do they seem to be fighting? Kuina, who was hiding behind the tree, covered her mouth in surprise for a while. Walking on the broken ground in person, Koshiro looked at the boy opposite, the boy who was holding the black reflective sword wrapped in armament haki in one hand, and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Although I have seen the scene of you cultivating here from a distance, I was already shocked. But now, the shock brought by stepping foot here in person is far greater than before. Quote, and looking at the tachi in your hand that almost reaches the highest level of armament I've heard of, it's hard to imagine that this is just the result of your study for a year. Zanu, you are indeed a real genius. Yay, even a genius is not enough to describe you. Maybe you are more appropriate to be called a monster. Standing a few dozen meters away, Zanu heard Koshiro's compliment. Zanu slashed his sword across his chest and bowed to Koshiro, saying, "Thank you for your compliment, Master, but I also want to know how far I have come in Kendo now, so I also ask Master for advice." After saying that, Zanu's pitch-black tachi that was originally horizontal to his chest slammed down and stood beside him. In an instant, Zanu had no wind all over his body, and his white windbreaker made a noise. In Zanu's eyes, a flash of red light representing the mighty observation haki flashed, full of fighting spirit. Asterisk. The invisible aura of Zanu suddenly erupted, the white windbreaker rustled and danced without the wind. In the face of Koshiro, Zanu didn't plan to use his ice ability, and used all other means to improve his combat power. Just as Koshiro knew Zanu's extraordinary strength, Zanu also knew that the master who had opened his eyes was not just an ordinary swordsmanship instructor in the eyes of other apprentices, but a real great swordsman. Even, there is a high possibility that it is the top swordsman. Therefore, when facing Koshiro, Zanu did not dare to be careless. "Master, I'm going." After Zanu said something to Koshiro, his feet suddenly exerted force, his slender body instantly turned into a white light, and he came to Koshiro in an instant. The sword in his hand slashed straight down, and as the blade passed, even the air was cut into waves that were visible to the naked eye. Zanu's long sky blue hair was blown into the sky by this tyrannical wave. In the face of Zanu's slash, Koshiro's waist was slightly bent, and he held the sword in both hands. At the same time, two water blue slashes brushed past Koshiro's body, instantly slashing two huge ravines from the already broken ground on both sides of Koshiro's back. Smoke and dust are flying everywhere. Koshiro backhanded, took the initiative to attack, and said at the same time, "Little guy, although I know that you will become a great swordsman sooner or later, I didn't expect this time to be so short." "Very good. Then, go on." With that said, the knife in Koshiro's hand became even sharper. Zanu resisted Koshiro's slash while Kaido, "Master, this is just your warm-up, you can't fool me." With that said, Zanu threw out another slash, one sharper than before. The even more powerful aqua blue sword energy swept out. Wherever the sword energy passed, the air in the air was instantly drained. In the face of such a powerful sword energy, Koshiro did not panic, but instead slashed down with the same slash. The same blood-red sword kai emanated from Koshiro's sword, and went towards Zanyu's sword kai. This dilapidated land has once again added a bottomless huge ravine. Koshiro also said at this time, "Aren't you warming up, little guy?" With the intersection of two tyrannical swords, one red and one blue, there was a huge roar in the entire sky. Boom! The two swords collided fiercely. After a short entanglement, the two sword chi, one red and one blue, exploded. Then the endless sword energy spread out. In an instant, thick smoke and dust splashed from the scene. There was a sword chi slashing through, revealing the real scene of the place where the sword chi collided. The entire place where the sword chi collided seemed to have experienced a natural disaster, and the earth was like a rag, and countless big pits were blown up. However, the aftermath of the battle between the two was always controlled not to spread towards the deep mountains. After all, based on what they saw and heard, they had already discovered Kuina's existence. However, due to their respective reasons, the two chose to let Kuina watch this battle by coincidence at the same time. As the only spectator watching the decisive battle between the two real great swordsmen, Kuina actually opened her eyes with disbelief after hearing her father say that this is Zanyu's training ground. The person father said was really that stinky brother who couldn't even beat himself. And what I saw next, the stinky brother who was always gentle and full of literary sense and showed a completely different belligerence than before after warming up, Kuina was even more trembling. However, with the passage of time when the two were fighting on the field, Kuina, who was watching, finally understood what the warm-up mentioned by his father and his stinky brother before. Compared to the battle that was getting more and more intense, and even Kuina's eyes couldn't catch up, it was really a warm-up before. But this does not prevent Kuina from being fascinated by the various sword skills shown in this battle. Even for a while, he didn't even have time to investigate why his stinky younger brother had such strength. This battle lasted for half a day. Until the night, the moon on the branches. At this time, Zanyu, whose breath was a little disordered, looked at Koshiro, who was also a little unstable, and the fighting intent in his eyes was so intense that he said, "Master, I'm going to use my strongest sword skills. Master, please be careful." Koshiro put away the knife, assumed the posture of showing the knife, looked at Zanyu, and said cheerfully, "Little guy, come on." Looking at Koshiro, who had also condensed his breath into ultimate, Zanyu nodded, then the same expression condensed and shouted, "Sword skill, chasing the stars and falling to the moon." Suddenly, Zanyu's body seemed to be transformed into a galaxy, and the stars in the galaxy were dazzling. And when the stars of these stars are so bright that they even illuminate the entire battlefield like the land of day. Among the stars, a crescent moon suddenly appeared. And after this round of hooking moon appears, it will absorb all the starlight. Suddenly it emits a brightness that is 100 times more than starlight. At this moment, Guyu seemed to have gathered enough power, with endless white light and sharp aura, and slammed towards the Koshiro cone. Facing Zanyu's unparalleled blow, Koshiro's eyes also showed a solemn look. "This little guy, I didn't expect it to be so terrifying. Looks like I'm going to do my best." Speaking softly, Koshiro exhaled quickly. Immediately afterwards, the hand holding the sword suddenly tightened, and an unparalleled evil, terrifying, ghost-like aura drifted out from Koshiro, and instantly formed a blood-red samurai armor behind Koshiro, holding an incomparably huge, the dark ghost of the sword. At this moment, Koshiro suddenly shouted, "Extremely, aye, ghost sword slash." As Koshiro's shout fell, Koshiro himself and the evil ghost behind him swung the sword towards the colliding Guyu. Boom rumble. A series of never-before-seen huge roars exploded continuously. The whole island even started shaking. The sleeping people in the village of Seymour-Jiji hundreds of miles away could not help but wake up from their dreams and ran out of their rooms one by one. What happened? There was an earthquake. It seems so, but I seem to have heard a strange noise before, and I don't know what happened. Hey, I think I heard it too. Quote. A group of villagers gathered in the empty street and talked a lot. Also, when the vibration sounded, I realized that Zoro, who ran quickly to the street, was a little worried at this time. "Master, Zanyu, Kuina, don't know where. Are they okay now?" At the place of war, everything has calmed down at this time. Koshiro and Zanu are also facing each other. The scene fell silent for a while. A gust of night wind blew, rustling the hem of Zanu's windbreaker, which had been smashed. At this time, Koshiro suddenly spoke up and asked deeply. Zanu, have you found your own kendo? Zanu also put away his original posture at this time, and once again returned to the gentle and noble son of the past. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Zanu looked up at the bright moon rising at an unknown time, and said warmly. In the daytime, the master once said, the real top swordsman has the power to cut off everything, but at the same time he has something that he can never cut off. I see, I know what I have that I can't cut off. As he spoke, figures appeared in Zanu's mind, Kuina, Koshiro, Zoro, and the girl who encouraged him to come out of despair in his memory. Thinking of this, Zanu's eyes were completely clear, and he continued. And now, what I lack is the power to cut everything. At least, compared to the existences I want to protect, the knife in my hand must at least cut through the whole world to be qualified. Now, it's not enough. Hearing Zanu's words, Koshiro was not worried, because he believed that Zanu could have the power he was after. Zanu, he has this talent. Cut open the world. Good swordsmanship. Koshiro complimented as usual, and then stepped back to the original path. But after taking 3 or 2 steps, he paused and said. When you go back, remember to bring Kuina back. After saying that, he left immediately. Originally, Zanu lifted the armament hockey from the sword in his hand. In an instant, the entire blade turned into iron filings and scattered all over the sky. Zanu watched this scene in silence, and thought to himself, it seems that in the future, we must find a qualified saber. Suddenly, Zanu seemed to have thought of something. Perhaps, despair. At this moment, a footstep sounded from far to near. Zanu turned around, and what he saw was Kuina. However, at this time, Kuina was expressionless, holding 2 wooden sticks as long as bamboo swords. Then in the moonlight, Zanu could see that there were even a few smears of scarlet on the stick. Antiquity. Just when Zanu was about to say something, Kuina suddenly threw a stick in his hand towards Zanu, and Zanu caught the stick subconsciously. Glancing at the Madara bloodline on the stick in his hand, Zanu raised his head and looked at Kuina's little hand, and sure enough, blood was dripping slowly from her little hand. After thinking for a while, Zanu wanted to understand that Kuina scratched when he pulled out the branches on the 2 sticks. Zanu frowned slightly. At this time, Kuina took the lead in making a formal swordsman challenge to Zanu. Then he looked at Zanu seriously and said, Your Excellency Zanu, Swordsman Kuina challenges you, please accept my challenge. Zanu frowned when he heard the words, Kuina you. However, before Zanu finished speaking, he was interrupted by Kuina. Your Excellency Zanu, please accept the challenge below, this is a challenge from a swordsman. At the same time, please do your best in the battle, don't let it go. To release water in a swordsman's challenge is the greatest insult to the swordsman, the sword in the opponent's hands. Your Excellency Zanu, please. Zanu looked at the opposite Kuina holding a wooden stick in both hands, as if he was holding a dagger. Especially for Kuina's big black eyes. Zanu saw fierce, extremely sharp eyes from it. But what hides beneath that fierceness is the distressing stubbornness and persistence. At this moment, Kuina and the wooden stick in her hand even seemed to have become a tachi, an extremely sharp tachi. Seeing Kuina like this, Zanu couldn't help but closed his eyes, took a deep breath again, and said. Is that so? I understand. This is a challenge from a swordsman who blocked everything, Zanu has no reason to refuse. The next moment, Zanu instantly opened his ruby-red eyes, his eyes lost the gentleness he had before. Some are only sharp. Even in Zanu's body, a sword aura of the level that was enough to fight against Koshiro swirled again. With the wooden stick in his hand in front of him, Zanu looked at Kuina solemnly and responded earnestly. Under Zanu, accept the challenge of swordsman Kuina. After saying that, Zanu's hand dropped instantly, as if it merged with his right arm. Leaning slightly, Zanu shouted loudly to Kuina. Come on. Hearing the words, Kuina's eyes widened instantly, holding wooden sticks in both hands and standing beside her ears, and then her body was also slightly curved. Then he rushed straight towards Zanu. Just as the wooden stick in Kuina's hand slashed towards Zanu, Zanu's right arm instantly swung out. Snapped. Crack. With what seemed to be a cracking sound, Kuina's small body had been blown away in the distance. And the wooden stick in her hand was broken in two at this time, and together with Kuina's body, it retreated in the air. After a few seconds, PFF'd, Kuina's body fell to the ground violently, and then slipped further on the ground for a long distance. Zanu watched this scene, his hand holding the wooden stick couldn't help subconsciously exerting force. The stick turned into two pieces directly in Zanu's hand and fell to the ground. However, Zanu didn't care, but looked at Kuina, who was lying on the ground, coughing and struggling to stand up, his eyes filled with distress. Scenes of Kuina taking care of herself in the past came to Zanu's mind. When I came to this world, the first time I opened it, I saw the surprised eyes of this little girl. Haha, Zanu has woken up. Get to know me, I'm your elder sister, Kuina, but you can't call me by my name, remember to call my elder sister in the future. Stinky brother, let's learn about sword skills, shall we? No, I'm going to play the piano. I know I can't beat you, Kuina. How could I agree to fight with you? Call my sister. Hey, it's a worry-free younger brother, but, forget it, since you like music, stinky brother, then go after your dream. My elder sister will definitely become the world's greatest swordsman, in stinky brother's pursuit of dreams on the way, escort. Oh, then thank you Kuina, you will definitely become the world's greatest swordsman in the future. Call my sister. However, you can still talk, hum hum hum. Call my sister, call my sister, call my sister. All these years of experiences with the girl in front of him flashed through Zanu's mind, making Zanu's heart ruthlessly touched. At this time, the girl was injured by herself, and even the simple act of standing up was struggling. Zanu knew that this was the pride and stubbornness of the girl in front of him. She wants to protect her stinky brother, so she will never fall in front of her stinky brother again. Zanu suddenly wanted to punch himself, and hurried over to help the girl up. However, Zanu can't do that. Kuina, it's all about success or failure. Your dream, your perseverance, your stubbornness, whether it can bloom in the future, it's all in one fell swoop. Come on, Kuina, come on, sister. After another minute, the girl finally stood up swayingly. As Zanu thought, the girl would never allow herself to fall down in front of her stinky brother. Protect your stinky brother for a lifetime. Single quote. This was the oath the girl made herself when they first met. Even now, I know that my younger brother is far stronger than me. Yeah, Kuina, the stinky brother is better than you. In the future, what are you going to do to protect the stinky brother? But, I've tried my best. For the dream of the world's greatest swordsman, and to protect my stinky brother, I have been training hard all the time. When others are eating, when others are sleeping, when others are joking, when others are drinking, when others are playing around. I've exhausted all the time I can use to train. Why even so, I'm still so weak. Kuina, who lowered her head, thought of this, and on her dusty face, 2 wispy tears fell on the ground. Why? Kuina suddenly whispered. Why, I am still so weak now. Although Kuina's voice was low as she was whispering, it entered Zanu's ears, who had been watching Kuina. At this moment, on the system interface in Zanu's mind, one of the 300 portraits of heritage heroes suddenly flashed. Zanu, who noticed this change, felt sorry for Kuina, but also cheered for Kuina secretly. At this time, Kuina's self-talking voice gradually grew louder. Obviously I have worked harder than everyone else. Obviously, I also have the pursuit and loyalty to the swordsmanship as well as anyone else. Mingming, I swore that I would become the world's greatest swordsman and protect my younger brother. But why even so? I'm still so weak. Even Zoro, who is 4 years younger than me, is about to catch up with me. Even if you give up the dignity of a swordsman and choose to stand up to challenge while your younger brother and father are exhausted from the fierce battle, you still can't hold on to a single round. I just want to fulfill my promise in the future and protect my brother. But, can't women really be great swordsmen? Kuina lowered her head, her small face stained with dust, pea-sized tears fell drop by drop. As Kuina's self-talk became louder and louder, on the system interface in Zanu's mind, the avatar of a certain heritage hero not only flickered faster and faster, but every time it flickered, the light became more and more dazzling. Zanu's drooping hand clenched tightly for some time, staring at the system interface. At this moment, Kuina suddenly raised her head and looked straight at Zanu. Shouted loudly, "I don't agree. I cannot be reconciled. I want to be the greatest swordsman in the world. I just want to protect you forever. Ooh." At the end of the speech, Kuina burst into tears directly and completely, and the cry spread toward the mountains, toward the sea, toward the sky, and in all directions. Tears had already wet Kuina's face, like a small cat. Hearing Kuina's final declaration of sincerity, Zanu's heart trembled fiercely. But Zanu didn't have time to think about it. Just when Kuina's final declaration fell, the image of the legacy hero that was always shining in Zanu's mind turned completely cold. Seeing this scene, Zanu's tense heart finally relaxed. Without looking at the information about the lit-up heritage hero, Zanu directly dodged, came directly to Kuina, and hugged Kuina's thin body tightly in his arms. Kuina didn't resist either, burying her little head directly in Zanu's chest, sobbing. Zanu didn't say anything immediately, just hugged the girl tightly. Everything around is so quiet at this moment. Did the night wind blow over Zanu's long sky blue hair and dance behind Zanu's back along with the hem of Zanu's windbreaker? Only the cry of the girl in her arms surrounds her, which is heartbreaking. After a long time, Zanu's gentle voice rang in the ears of the girl in his arms. Kuina is the most powerful female swordsman in the world, how could she just admit defeat? Call my sister. Kuina was buried in Zanu's arms, and even though she was still snoring, she refuted it in a sullen voice. Zanu ignored Kuina's mantra and said softly, "Women are inherently weaker than men, so they must not be called the world's greatest swordsman. It's just that the master doesn't understand women. Therefore, the master doesn't have a method suitable for Kuina's cultivation, so Kuina's swordsmanship has gradually become slow. Call my sister." However, there was no swordsmanship suitable for Kuina before, but after this moment, there is. After speaking, Zanu put his hands on Kuina's thin shoulders, so that he could clearly see the surprised expression on Kuina's small face, who was crying at the moment. Zanu looked at Kuina's little face and smiled softly. Then his forehead leaned forward, touching Kuina's forehead. At the same time, Zanu said to the system in his mind, "This is Kuina's heritage, now, let Kuina accept this surprise. Start heroic inheritance." As Zanu's voice fell, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up where Zanu and Kuina's foreheads touched. Kuina's small face suddenly became shocked, but as the light became brighter, Kuina's big eyes had to compare. Before closing her eyes, what came into Kuina's mind was Zanu's gentle and handsome smile. This stinky brother is always so gentle. Besides, before he knew it, he had really grown up. The golden light lasted for 30 seconds between the foreheads of the two of them. After the light finally dissipated, Zanu raised his head slightly and looked at Kuina, who had fallen asleep at this time. Zanu understood that this was Kuina's mind that had begun to accept the seeds of various abilities from heritage heroes. The gentle princess hugged Kuina's body. Zanu walked steadily to the next stage next to the huge piece of wood that he had cut off with his sword practice, sat down slowly, and put Kuina in his arms at the same time. After adjusting a comfortable position for Kuina, Zanu took off his cape and put it on Kuina in his arms. Raising his hand, he gently wiped the dust and tears on Kuina's face, looking at Kuina's sleeping face. Kuina's last stubborn words still linger in my ears. "I just want to protect you forever." Knowing that his strength is far weaker than himself, he still has to protect himself, a person who already has the admiral of headquarters level. Zanu didn't find Kuina's remarks funny, but was moved. With a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth, Zanu looked at Kuina's small face and laughed softly. "What a stubborn little girl." After a slight pause, he continued. "However, then the safety of my life will be handed over to you, sister." After wiping the last trace of tears on Kuina's face, Zanu sank his mind into his mind and said to the system, "System, bring out the hero information of Kuina and her inheritance." Then, a virtual panel unfolded in Zanu's mind. Inheritance No. 1. Kuina. Age, 11 years old. Heritage hero, Unohana Retsu. Hero ranking, 254th. Abilities. 1. Dao slash, sword Dao, dark sword, scimitar slash, skill inheritance, 20%. 2nd. Kido, Bakudo, Hado, defensive barrier, Kaido, skill inheritance, 0%. 3. Zanpakudo, Minazuki, skill inheritance, 10% only the blade, to be received. 4th. The body technique, white hits, Shunpo, skill inheritance, 0%. 5th. Practical experience, skill inheritance, 100%. Hero inheritance, 5%. Current strength, equivalent to Major Marine's strength. Reminder, the ring of the inheritor has not been claimed. Quote. Looking at Kuina's personal attribute panel, especially when he saw the name and ranking of the heroes of the inheritance, Zanu was a little surprised. Afterwards, she will be sincerely happy for Kuina. I didn't expect that the hero of Kuina's inheritance is Unohana Retsu. She is known as the woman who learned all the styles of swordsmanship in the world and holds the title of first-generation Kenpachi. Let's not talk about other abilities, but as far as Kendo is concerned, if Kuina achieves 100% of his Kendo inheritance skills, he will definitely have swordsmanship that reaches or surpasses the realm of a great swordsman. Also, the first inheritance was to receive a 20% inheritance from the inheritance hero. Unohana Retsu has a 20% inheritance in Dao slashing. It seems that this inheritance hero is really suitable for Kuina. I only inherited it and only accepted it. 10% of the ice ability. Tomorrow, when Kuina wakes up, she should be very happy, right? Thinking of this, Zanu also became happy, and said to the system at the same time. Get Zanpakudo and the Ring of Inheritance. As Zanu's voice fell, 2 golden lights flashed beside Zanu. Then a golden light turned into a Tachi with a purple scabbard and stood beside Zanu. And another golden light fell directly on the windbreaker covering Kuina, and then got in. Seeing this, although Zanu knew that the result was not dangerous, he couldn't help but lift off the windbreaker covering Kuina's body, just to see Kuina's left middle finger on his chest, a ring of the same style as Zanu's hand flashed. Fluorescence. Below the gemstone of the ring, 3 numbers are clearly visible. 254. This is the hero ranking of Unohana Retsu, the legacy hero of Kuina. Seeing Kuina's cute little face still sleeping, Zanu was also relieved, and then put the windbreaker over Kuina again, hugging Kuina and falling asleep slowly. You must know that Zanu and Koshiro not only fought fiercely since noon today, but also concentrated before Kuina accepted the inheritance, both physically and mentally exhausted to the extreme. After all, although Zanu already has the strength of Marine Admiral, he is only less than 10 years old this year. Even though he has undergone hellish training, his age is too young, resulting in mental and physical problems that cannot be completely solved. It is precisely because of this that Zanu fell into a deep sleep after a while. On the other side, Koshiro was walking towards home in the mountains and forests, recalling the previous battle scene with Zanu again. With a squinting smile on his face, he couldn't help but show a wry smile. Zanu, this stinky brat, actually released water at the end. That last move seems to be the sword skill Zanu called, following the stars and falling to the moon. It's really strong. The power of falling to the moon is far more than that. However, even so, it is comparable to my strongest sword move, G. I, Ghost Sword. It's really good. It's worthy of the name of monster. Stinky Boy thought I couldn't see that he finally released the water. Do you really think that my master is calling for nothing? Thinking of this, the wry smile on Koshiro's face instantly turned into pride. No matter how monstrous you are, in the end, you still don't want to call me a master. After comforting himself with such a self-deceiving self, Koshiro finally couldn't help thinking. I don't know how much power Zanu got in the end. Hey, the apprentice is too evil, but before Zanu collided with the last move, the one that passed away was Conqueror's Haki. Thinking of the blue-gold light that was visible to the naked eye, the electric light that appeared all over Zanu's body instantly before the final attack, although it only appeared for a moment, it still did not escape Koshiro's eyes. Koshiro even noticed that the only place where the blue and golden light disappeared, the space around Zanu seemed to be a little distorted, and there were countless black cracks. And the land at the foot of Zanu directly formed a small semicircular pit. Conqueror's Haki, which can distort space and even tear it apart, is unheard of. Zanyu's audacity is only as strong as this. It's just that I don't know the throne in this little guy's heart, which one is it? Thinking of this, Koshiro remembered Zanyu's unknown background, and at the time of the final dialogue, Zanyu pursued the kendo of cutting the world. These all indicate that Zanyu's future is not destined to be simple. However, then Koshiro's expression suddenly relaxed. Forget it, children and grandchildren will have their own children and grandchildren. Zanyu's path from now on will eventually be left to him. Besides, with that little guy's enchanting aptitude, in a few years, what else can stop him? Thinking of Zanyu's talent, Koshiro completely relaxed. I hope Zanyu can persuade Kuina to let go of her persistence at this moment. After all, kendo is too hard for girls. And this is also today Koshiro deliberately did not expose Kuina's stocking, and even let Kuina see the real purpose of this sword fight. However, it was impossible for Koshiro to think that Zanyu not only did not persuade Kuina to give up kendo, but instead found a shortcut to her dream for Kuina. In the early morning of the next day, the sun had risen, and the sea breeze above the sea was blowing gently, with a hint of coolness. Above the sea, a few seagulls circled and flew towards the sea, and from time to time they plunged their heads into the sea. When they flew up again, in the long beak, a big fat fish was struggling and biting its tail, but in the end it couldn't escape. Destiny to become food. The seagulls, who had feasted on a beautiful meal, couldn't help but fly happily in the sky, chirping. Under the tree stump not far from the sea, Kuina slowly opened her eyes. What caught my eye was Zanyu's sleeping face with his head down, still very cute. Especially the long sky blue hair, which fluttered gently under the breeze from the sea not far away. For a while, Kuina was a little obsessed with it, and could not help but subconsciously whispered, "Smelly brother is really cute." As soon as Kuina's voice fell, Zanyu suddenly opened his eyes, and his ruby red eyes just met Kuina's lovely, somewhat absent-minded eyes. Both of them were stunned for a moment, and then Kuina, who reacted like a frightened bunny, quickly jumped up from Zanyu's arms, and even Zanyu's windbreaker covered her body and panicked. With his back to Zanyu, Kuina blushed and her heart was pounding. "What's the matter? You actually fell asleep in the arms of your stinky brother last night." "Ah, my majesty as an elder sister will completely disappear." Thinking like this, Kuina raised her small fist subconsciously, just to bring the white trench coat in her arms to the front. The moment she saw the windbreaker, Kuina was also stunned, and then she remembered that when she just woke up, it seemed that the clothes on her body were the clothes of the stinky brother. For a while, Kuina's originally shy expression slowly calmed down, and bursts of warmth rose in her heart. Right, yesterday. Kuina suddenly sounded yesterday's thing. From following Zanyu and Koshiro, to watching the battle between the two, and then to defeat Zanyu himself, crying after the defeat, and finally being hugged by Zanyu, the golden light before falling asleep. The most important thing is, in his mind, the training methods for the countless skills that suddenly appeared. Kuina clenched her hands, feeling the unfamiliar power that suddenly appeared in her body, and looked at her hands in disbelief. At the same time, she also saw the white star ring that she was wearing on her left middle finger, and the 3 numbers under the gemstone on the ring. Everything is exactly the same as the information that appeared in the dream last night. Kuina shouted in surprise, "Really? This is all true?" While speaking, Kuina tried to command in her mind, "Show inheritance attribute panel." Following Kuina's order in his mind, a virtual screen suddenly appeared in front of Kuina's eyes. Inheritance No. 1. Kuina. Age, 11 years old. Heritage Hero. Unohana Retsu. Hero Ranking, 254th. Abilities, 1. Dao / Sword Dao, Dark Sword, Scimitar / Skill Inheritance, 20%. 2nd, Kido, Bakudo, Hado, Defensive Barrier, Kaido, Skill Inheritance, 0%. 3. Zanpakudo, Minazuki, Skill Inheritance, 10%. 4th, the Body Technique, White Hits, Shunpo, Skill Inheritance, 0%. 5th, Practical Experience, Skill Inheritance, 100%. Hero Inheritance, 5%. Current Strength, equivalent to Major Marine's strength. Seeing this incredible scene actually become a reality, Kuina covered her mouth with her hands in surprise, her face full of disbelief. Yes, as the inheritor selected by the inherited hero, you can also see your own virtual attribute panel. Of course, only the inheritors can see their own attribute panel. Even if they are both inheritors, they cannot see each other, of course, except for the host of Zanu's system. Just when Kuina was overwhelmed with shock, Zanu's gentle voice came from behind. All of this, of course, is true. Zanu's voice woke Kuina up, and he couldn't help turning to look at Zanu, just to see Zanu holding a scabbard with a purple dagger thrown towards him. The result of Kuina's subconsciousness was that Zanu threw the dagger over. The moment he took the dagger, Kuina felt a blood connection to the dagger in his hand, and subconsciously spit out a name. Minazuki. As if feeling the call of his master, a purple fluorescence flashed across Minazuki's surface. Zanu looked at the excited Kuina and smiled softly. Congratulations to Kuina. In the future, becoming a swordsman, a great swordsman, and even beyond the realm of a great swordsman is no longer an obstacle that can stop you. Hearing Zanu's congratulations, Kuina still subconsciously replied, "Call my sister." At the same time Kuina raised her head, full of surprise, looking at Zanu who was smiling in front of her. Then, as if thinking of something, Kuina looked at Zanu and shouted, "No wonder you are so powerful. You must be the inheritor too. And you became the inheritor very early. Right?" Zanu didn't expect Kuina's first question. Instead of asking himself what was going on, but asked such a question. Looking at Kuina who looked like, "You can't lie to me," Zanu hesitated for a while, then nodded and said directly, "Yes, I was indeed the inheritor a long time ago." Before Zanu could continue, he saw Kuina trot across from him and asked with a hopeful expression, "Stinky brother, what is the ranking of the heroes you inherited?" While talking, Kuina grabbed Zanu's left hand and looked straight at the ring on Zanu's left middle finger. Quote. However, when she saw the Chinese character 0 on Zanu's ring, Kuina's lovely brows were slightly wrinkled, as if she was recalling something. But in the end, he gave up. His little face was full of doubts. Then he looked at Zanu and asked in confusion, "Brother Stinky, what is the word on your inheritance ring? Why is it different from the information about the inheritance memory in my mind? What is your rank?" Seeing Kuina's cute little face full of obsession with rankings, Zanu guessed Kuina's little thought, but he still answered Kuina's doubts with a chuckle. "My ring is a bit special, so it is a little different from the information in your inheritance memory. However, my inheritance hero is a powerful person called the Queen of Ice, whose name is Ace Day. As for the ranking, it's 261. Chapter 11. As for the ranking, it's 261. When Kuina heard that Zanu's heritage heroes were ranked below her, her cute little face suddenly smiled even more. At the same time, he would also look at Zanu with some pride, and hummed, "HMPH, my heritage hero ranking is 254. 254. It's 7 places higher than yours. My inheritance information said that between the rankings of the inheritance heroes, the strength of each ranking is very different. I will definitely be more powerful than you in the future. Hum. Seeing Kuina's cute tsundere appearance, Zanu couldn't help but smile and said, Yes, Kuina will be the most powerful in the future. Kuina should protect me well then. Call my sister." After subconsciously refuting a sentence, Kuina finally heard Zanu's next sentence clearly, and then looked at Zanu looking at him with a half-smile. Kuina instantly reacted, remembering that he cried a lot last night and said to protect Zanu's appearance, he was embarrassed for a while. Then he blushed and stared at Zanu, viciously, his eyes were full of murderous threats. "Nothing happened last night. You didn't see anything either. Are you right, smelly brother?" Although Kuina thinks her expression is very vicious, but in Zanu's eyes, she thinks Kuina is stupid and cute, very cute. However, in order to take care of Kuina's face, Zanu also nodded and responded with a smile. "Hey, it was so dark last night, I can't see my fingers. Kuina, what happened last night?" Hearing Zanu's answer, Kuina nodded in satisfaction and gave Zanu a small look of, "You know the person," then looked at Zanu and said, "Stinky brother, how about I come here to train with you in the future?" Zanu didn't expect Kuina's mind to jump here in an instant, but after thinking about it, Zanu nodded and agreed. However, he still reminded, "However, Kuina, you didn't go back overnight. Why don't you go back and talk to the master? Maybe the master will be worried. Before Zanu finished speaking, he saw Kuina's small face, then turned around and ran towards the dojo. Running and shouting loudly, I've suffered, I will definitely be taught by my father when I go back. It's all my fault, stinky brother. I didn't know how to take me back last night. I'll settle the account with you when I come next time. After a while, Kuina ran away. Zanu looked at Kuina's back, opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. At the same time, Zanu only felt warm in his heart. Actually, Zanu has been waiting for a question from Kuina since Kuina woke up. What the hell is going on? Single quote. Ask yourself, who would not be curious about the reason for suddenly getting such a power? Zanu asked himself that he couldn't do it. Therefore, Zanu was ready to answer Kuina's question. However, Zanu didn't plan to make up an answer to fool Kuina, but really planned to say it all. After all, Zanu didn't think that the system could be more important than his family. Especially after seeing Kuina's stubborn cry last night saying that he would protect himself for the rest of his life, Zanu also swore in his heart that no matter what Kuina wants to know, he will tell Kuina truthfully. It's just that Zanu didn't expect that Kuina would leave like this, and he didn't hold Zanu to the bottom of what happened to him. Is Kuina stupid? Or is Kuina not curious? No, Zanu knew that Kuina just didn't want to force herself, she didn't want to make things difficult for herself. Just a little girl who likes to think about others. Looking at Kuina's small back, Zanu's eyes filled with a gentle smile. Then he turned and walked towards the pillar-shaped mountain standing by the sea. It's time to finish the daily training. A few minutes later, Kuina had already run to the top of the first mountain that he had turned over when he arrived. Kuina turned to look in the direction of the original training ground. As a result, he didn't find anything. In the middle, a column-shaped mountain with a height of thousands of meters is moving wildly in the sea. At this moment, Kuina's mouth was round, and then she said in disbelief. Does Brother Stinky train like this every day? It's unbelievable. Afterwards, Kuina still turned around and ran towards the dojo at the other side of the mountain. At the same time, I secretly said in my heart, no wonder the stinky brother is so powerful, it seems that I have to train well, otherwise I don't know when I will be able to catch up with the stinky brother. As for Zanu's secret, as Zanu thought, Kuina knew that this kind of shocking thing must be full of big secrets. However, if the stinky brother is embarrassed, what about the big secret? It's a big deal, I don't know. No matter how big the secret, can it be as important as his stinky brother? After half an hour, a black spot suddenly appeared on the sea beach, and then it expanded rapidly. After a few seconds, a shadow of nearly 10,000 square meters had been formed. Subsequently, boom, the sound of a giant falling to the ground resounded, causing a burst of smoke and dust, and the ground even shook slightly. Until the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, the status quo of the giant was finally revealed. It was a column-shaped mountain that was thousands of meters tall. At this time, after completing the daily training task of swimming 100 nautical miles against the mountains and the sea, Zanu, who was naked and wearing white trousers, walked to the shore from the sea. During this process, an extremely cold air flashed from Zanu's body, instantly freezing the seawater on his trousers into ice crystal powder and dissipating. After landing, Zanu did not go to practice swords as usual. With a wave of the right hand, in this hot summer day, an ice crystal throne was formed directly. There is an extremely cold air around the throne. Zanu didn't care about the chill, so he sat naked on the ice throne. Leaning against the back of the ice crystal throne, Zanu leaned on his face with his left hand and placed his right hand on the throne armchair, tapping lightly with his 5 fingers rhythmically. Looking at the endless sea with ruby-red eyes, Zanu began to think about his future path. The first inheritance hero Acid's skills that can improve combat power have been completed to 100%. If you want to continue to improve your strength, then there are only 2 paths in front of me now. The first rule is to go out to sea immediately, find enough other 4 inheritors, and then open the second inheritance hero that belongs to me. However, there are currently 2 drawbacks to this scheme that need to be considered. The first point is to find the inheritors and the difficulty of the inheritance process. The detection range of the system is only 100 nautical miles, and the sea is vast. It is undoubtedly difficult to find 4 inheritors in such a vast sea, is huge. Furthermore, with the level of trouble in the heroic inheritance process, if you are not fully prepared to sail in the sea, this road will hardly work. And the second disadvantage is that my strength is far from enough. If you let others know that a person who clearly has the strength of Admiral of Headquarters, but thinks that he is not enough to sail the sea, he will be directly depressed and spurting blood. However, in Zanu's opinion, it's really not enough. As an orphan in his previous life, why did he live? Zanu considered all the difficulties he would encounter before doing anything. Coupled with the encouragement influence of Robin later, Zanu has reached a point where he is too cautious, and can even be said to be go. Therefore, in Zanu's view, the strength of Admiral of Headquarters is indeed not enough to sail on the sea. What if there are 2, or even 3 marine admirals? What if I meet the 4 emperors? What if I encounter CP0? What if I meet the 5 elders? What if I encounter the world government or other hidden powerhouses in the sea? Although these problems seem unlikely, but what if? Therefore, the strength of the Admiral of Headquarters is not enough to sail on the sea. There's nothing wrong with this. At this time, Zanu continued to think. The first way does not work, then, only the second way is left. That is, I will further develop the capabilities that I already have. And my current main abilities, to sum up, are ice abilities and swordsmanship. Speaking of the development of the ice ability, Zanu's mind involuntarily appeared a woman with long dark blue hair, a delicate face and a cold temperament. Kang Yu, the real queen of ice. Thinking of Kang Yu's appearance, Zanu's mind couldn't help but imagine the appearance of his buddies in the dormitory in his previous life who often called his uncle. In his previous life, it should be just a coincidence. After all, that Kang Yu is just a character in the comics, how could he have anything to do with him? However, now that I think about it again, I have personally traveled to the world of animation, so maybe I really have something to do with Kang Yu. After all, it's all too coincidental. However, at this time, Zanu himself shook his head, threw this thought out, and said to himself, let's not talk about whether it has anything to do with it. Even if it does, it's already something before the third world, so what does it have to do with me after the third world? Thinking like this, Zanu's irritable mood instantly calmed down, and he continued to think about the previous problem. However, for the development of Frost's ability, you can learn from it, or learn Kang Yu's skills. Thinking like this, Zanu couldn't help but prepare to test it out. So, Zanu, who was originally sitting on the throne of ice, sat up, raised his right hand, facing the sea in front, and shouted suddenly, Kowloon Xuanbing, Kowloon Xuanbing. With Zanu's loud drink, the endless chill instantly condenses on the sea. At the same time, Zanu's complexion really turned white rapidly, and countless sweats instantly left on his handsome and lovely cheeks. However, Zanu did not stop the output of the power of ice, and continued to support it with gritted teeth. Slowly, Zanu's face turned pale, and when beads of sweat the size of beans dripped directly from his forehead, on the sea in front of him, 9 huge lifelike ice snakes finally took shape. However, when Zanu continued to use the power of ice and planned to manipulate the 9 ice snakes to complete the ultimate move of killing the 9 dragons, he did find that no matter how the power of ice was used, the 9 ice snakes could not be made like living creatures, move like that. In the end, it could only be like 9 motionless ice sculptures colliding together to complete a pirated version of the Kowloon killing technique. Zanu, who was sitting on the throne of ice, watched the last scene with a pale face and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He said to himself, it seems that there is still a long way to go to complete this move. However, Zanu was not discouraged, he was even more happy in his heart. After all, having a longer road means that after completing this move in the future, in this world, the strength will be even higher. According to Zanu's previous life, stealing the stars and 9 moons sky, comics, among Kang Yu's skills, there will be many more powerful moves than this move, 9 Dragon Xuanbing. And this undoubtedly no longer shows that Zanu's guess is correct about the future development path of the ice ability. After closing his eyes and resting for a while to recover his mental strength, Zanu opened his eyes again and returned to his previous appearance, continuing to think about the future of his other abilities. Compared to the ability of ice, in terms of kendo, I have inherited the kendo of Ace Day, and I have also learned all the kendo theory of my master, and even the sword skills above kendo have been learned 90%. Moreover, over the years, I have already integrated these two types of swordsmanship, so that my swordsmanship is now qualified to touch the throne of the world's largest swordsman. However, compared to the cultivation of the power of ice, if you want to go farther in kendo, then you must have your own kendo. And this may be the reason why the master asked that question last night. However, in this regard, my self-created swordsmanship, extremely chasing the stars and falling to the moon, is a good start. I forged my swordsmanship with the mighty power to cut open the world, and the explosive strength did not disappoint me. Last night, even if I reduced the power of G, star, moon, and moon by 70%, I could still compete evenly with the master's strongest swordsmanship, G. Ghost sword, and the power is not bad. Koshiro. So, it has been decided that, in terms of swordsmanship, in the future, I will use my own swordsmanship to create my own swordsmanship and embark on the world-shattering swordsmanship. However, before that, I still need a qualified saber. Thinking of this, Zanu recalled the scene where the sword in his hand turned into iron filings after the battle last night. If a worker wants to do a good job, he must first sharpen his weapon. A swordsman must never be without a good saber. Thinking of this, Zanu's last flash of inspiration from last night came to his mind again. I remember that Kang Yu seems to have a saber, and the name seems to be Cold Vault. That saber seems to be made by the world's first scientist Kwai Popova using the tears of Dionysus. Although, I don't have tears of Dionysus, nor do scientists like Kwai Popova help me make knives, but... Thinking of this, Zanu raised his right hand and grabbed it abruptly, and the ordinary ice dagger gradually took shape. At this time, Zanu's right hand was holding the hilt of the Hanbing Taidao, and his left hand was indeed raised directly to hold the blade. Shish! The sound of a sharp blade slicing flesh and blood sounded directly, and then he saw Zanu's left palm being cut directly, and the blood in the palm directly dyed the entire surface of the blade red. Zanu gritted his teeth and said to himself, "However, I have the essence of demons. In the blood in my body, there is also the bloodline of the ancient super dangerous species that created the essence of demons. I don't believe it. In the future, with the improvement of my ice ability, I will freeze the blade of this ice sword once a day, and I will sacrifice my own blood once a day. Taito will lose to the so-called supreme swordsman. From now on, you will be my cold dome, and you will definitely sit in the position of the world's #1 sword." After a few minutes, the wound on Zanu's hand healed automatically. I have to say that it is indeed the bloodline of the ancient super dangerous species. It can heal the wound so quickly. Although the wound is small and shallow, the healing speed is faster than the ability of ordinary Zone Devil Fruit. Then Zanu used the ice ability to condense a scabbard for the Cold Vault in his hand, and then put it away. Just as Zanu was about to start a new training session, Kuina's voice suddenly came out of Zanu's mind. "Hey, stinky brother, I'm going to go to your place. Give me your consent." 10 minutes ago, in the Isshin Dojo. Many apprentices in the dojo are still starting a new day of kendo learning as fiercely as yesterday. However, when they found out that Kuina was here today, and where he was training as before, they couldn't help but be a little surprised, but they saw Koshiro kneeling on the steps as always, and he didn't look too surprised or anxious. Everyone thought that it was Koshiro who asked Kuina to do something, so they didn't care too much. However, there is one exception, and that is Zoro. Zoro frantically trained his dual swordsmanship, and he couldn't help but subconsciously looked at the place where Kuina trained in the past. Looking at the empty training ground, Zoro couldn't help thinking of the scene where Kuina finally ran out of the dojo yesterday. Zoro also knows that yesterday's Kuina went to follow Koshiro and Zanu, but he hasn't come back yet. But when Zoro stopped the two knives in his hand and turned to look at Koshiro again, he found that Koshiro was also looking out of the gate of the dojo from time to time. Even if Zoro couldn't understand the real expression under those squinting eyes, he could guess that Koshiro was also in a hurry at this time. Seeing this scene, Zoro immediately stopped training and thought about it. Just when he was about to ask Koshiro, he saw a panicked figure suddenly running in from the gate. It is Kuina. Koshiro also felt relieved when he saw Kuina running in. At the same time, He always felt that Kuina seemed to be a little different, but he couldn't tell what the difference was. Father. Kuina came to Koshiro and greeted Koshiro respectfully, but her little face was filled with undisguised happiness. After Koshiro's eyes met Kuina's relaxed, cheerful gaze, he suddenly realized. It turned out that he hadn't seen Kuina's smile so relaxed for too long. However, when Koshiro's eyes swept to Minazuki, who was being held in Kuina's arms, he was slightly surprised. He actually felt a sense of danger on Atadao. However, Koshiro also did not say anything. Just as he did with Zanu, Koshiro believes that everyone has their own destiny and fortune, so everyone has their own path, and Koshiro will never intervene to change anything. Kuina, go wash your face and change your clothes. Hearing this, Kuina nodded cheerfully to Koshiro, then trotted towards the backyard with Minazuki in her arms. Koshiro looked at his daughter's back, and suddenly found that his daughter's breath had changed. It became even more fierce, like a sharp blade about to be unsheathed. Zanu, you little guy, you really make people. After sighing in his heart, Koshiro looked back. Without Koshiro to explore, he can directly determine that there is no other possibility for the transformation of his daughter except his own appearance, Zanu. After all, Zanu has shown too much, incredible, in front of him. It seems that Kuina has also found her own kendo. She has also broken the impossibility of being tied to women. What will happen in the future depends on Kuina's own choice. On the other side, Zoro watched Kuina come back, and while he was relieved, his heart was even more urgent. Originally, he could still feel the strength of Kuina. It seemed that as long as he kept training hard, he would definitely be able to defeat Kuina one day. However, when he saw Kuina again just now, Zoro's innate sense of danger let Zoro know. At this moment, Kuina's danger level is countless times stronger than yesterday. Looks like my training is far from enough. Afterwards, the bamboo sword in Zoro's hand swung faster and faster, attacking the dummy like a storm. A few minutes later, after clearing things up, Kuina put on a new set of gym clothes, came to Koshiro, bowed slightly to Koshiro, her expression was a little pleading, and said, Father, I hope to be able to train with Stinky, and Zanu in the future, I hope to get your approval. Hearing this, Koshiro opened his slightly squinted eyes and looked at Kuina, and Kuina also looked at Koshiro without any intention of retreating. After a long time, Koshiro's face suddenly returned to his usual smile, and he sighed with emotion. Hey, my daughter has grown up. Then he looked at Kuina again, nodded with a smile, and said, Go, I agree. Hearing Koshiro's words, Kuina's original stubborn expression was instantly replaced by surprise. Thank you, father. With a happy smile on her little face, Kuina thanked Koshiro loudly. At this moment, the voice of Zoro challenging again came from behind Kuina. Kuina, I want to challenge you, accept my challenge. Hearing Zoro's challenge, Kuina turned around, frowned and thought at Zoro's menacing appearance. Seeing that Kuina didn't agree to your challenge request today, Zoro's eyes were puzzled. However, before what Zoro said, Kuina clapped her hands, as if she had figured out something, looked at Zoro and said, Zoro, in the future I will go to a place where my dreams can come true and I won't be in the gym very often. So Zoro, let's make a promise. Today every month in the future will be the date of the challenge. I will come back and wait for your challenge. Hearing Kuina's words, Zoro was taken aback, and subconsciously repeated Kuina's words. Fulfill my dream of yours. Kuina laughed and scolded. It's to become the world's greatest swordsman, idiot. Hearing Kuina's words, Zoro immediately ran everything else behind his head, his eyes flashed with a strong fighting intent, and said loudly. The throne of the world's greatest swordsman, the future must be mine. Accept my challenge. Seeing this, Kuina smiled and also drew a bamboo sword from the bamboo basket next to her. A few minutes later, Kuina ran out of the Taoist temple and came to a place without people. Kuina tried to communicate Zanu in her mind through the inheritance star ring based on the information in the inheritance memory. Hey, stinky brother, I'm going to go to your place. Give me your consent. Just as Kuina said this in her mind, she heard Zanu's voice reply in her mind. Good. Immediately afterwards, I saw a golden light shoot out from the countermeasure inheritance star ring on the index finger of the left hand, gradually forming a golden gate in front of him. Seeing such a miraculous scene, Kuina's big and beautiful eyes flashed with deep curiosity, and then she looked at the ring on her index finger again, and she couldn't help being surprised from the bottom of her heart. However, seeing the star ring on her left middle finger, Kuina's beautiful brows slightly wrinkled, and then she seemed to think of something. Her face was slightly rosy. But still with a firm eye, he directly pulled the inheritance star ring off his middle finger. And then put it on the ring finger. Then he stepped into the door of light and disappeared. Time flies, and before you know it, 8 years have passed. This year, Zanu officially went to sea. And in the endless future, the sea will call this year, the Emperor is coming. It was another sunny day. Above East Blue, a huge maritime merchant ship was sailing slowly on the sea facing the breeze. Oda Ichiro, a middle-aged gentleman with a round spectacle in his right eye and a bulging figure, is also the owner of this merchant ship. Walking on East Blue all the year round, in addition to transporting goods, I often carry some guests to play on East Blue. It is precisely because of this that Oda Ichiro has developed a pair of eyes that can recognize people's hearts for many years, which allows him to see a stranger's character, temperament, family, social status, etc. at the first glance, can be recognized at a glance. However, at this time, Ichiro Oda, while blocking a group of female passengers and waitresses behind him, looked at the front of the deck of the merchant ship in shock and awe, leaning on the railing and looking at the sea, and at the same time a man and a woman in white trench coats seemed to be communicating something. The shocking scene just now appeared in Oda Ichiro's mind. 10 minutes ago, Ichiro Oda, who was standing on the top floor of the merchant ship, faced the sea breeze and looked at the calm sea. He was in a good mood and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The weather is really nice today. Would you like to have a party later? Well, the opportunity is rare. Let the guests and crew members relax and celebrate. Just as Oda Ichiro was talking to himself, a huge dragon roar suddenly came from the sky behind him. Roar. The sound was so loud that even the sea surface set off waves in the huge sound waves. At the same time, everyone on the merchant ship heard this huge dragon roar, and couldn't help but panic. What's the matter? What's the matter with that roar just now? Did you meet the Sea Kings? Otherwise, how could a creature make such a huge roar? Mom, I don't want to die yet. Untouchables, get out of the way. Laozi is a noble of the Goya kingdom. Baron Ellen, don't let go of the lifebuoy, wait for Laozi to return, and make your whole family slaves. Quote. At the same time, on the top floor of the merchant ship, Ichiro Oda was also sitting limply on the board of the ship at this time, watching with horror in his eyes a mighty and ferocious ice-blue dragon rushing towards the merchant ship from the distant sky. What kind of monster is this? Why are you staring at my ship? Is it really over for today? What kind of monster is this? Why are you staring at my ship? Is it really over for today? Looking at the ice-blue giant dragon that had come to the top of his head in an instant, Oda Ichiro was completely desperate. However, at this moment, a soft and pleasant female voice suddenly came down from the sky. Hey, Zanu, you read it wrong, it's not a pirate ship. Put away your ice dragon, you're scaring people. Hearing this female voice, Oda Ichiro was also stunned. And right here, an equally gentle male voice came down from the sky. Hey, it's really not a pirate ship. I originally looked at this big ship in the sky, I thought only pirates would have it. I was going to scare the pirates and grab the boat as our temporary sailing tool. But now it seems to have caused some trouble for others. It seems that I have to go down and apologize in person. Hearing this, Ichiro Oda saw that 2 figures suddenly fell from the sky. Clap. At this time, Oda Ichiro also roughly guessed what happened from the conversation just now, and his already desperate face regained some composure. After wiping the sweat from his forehead, Oda Ichiro fixed his eyes on the 2 figures in front of him. It was when he saw 1 girl and 2 young men in a year standing in front of him, smiling apologetically at him. The man in front of him looked no more than an 18-year-old boy, wearing a white shirt inside, a pair of white trousers, and a white trench coat on the outermost side, with a handle around his waist, which looked very unusual. The famous knife, the long sky blue hair and the hem of the white windbreaker fluttered slightly. The young man's handsome face was a little apologetic at this time, as if he was apologizing for his violent actions just now. Next to the boy is a girl of the same age, perhaps a year or two older than the boy, dressed in almost the same clothes as the boy, with a famous purple sword around her waist. Perhaps the only difference is that the girl has long navy blue hair. Oda Ichiro looked at the pair of men and women in front of him, and two terms appeared in his mind instantly. Emperor, swordsman. Although the boy in front of him looked apologetic, Ichiro Oda did see an indescribable temperament from the boy. In this regard, even if he has traveled through countless countries and seen countless nobles, the king is far from being able to compare. The only word Oda Ichiro could think of to describe this young man was the word, emperor. As for the girl next to her, her fierce aura was like a sharp sword, so Oda Ichiro directly judged that the girl was a very powerful swordsman. At least in East Blue, he has never seen a swordsman who can match a girl's aura. Just as Oda Ichiro's thoughts turned sharply, he saw the young man in front of him suddenly walking towards him. He suddenly stretched out his hand, looked at himself apologetically, and said warmly, "I'm sorry, I scared you a bit just now. My name is Zanu, and the girl next to me is called Kuina. The two of us got lost in the ocean. I wonder if you can take us for a while." Oda Ichiro looked at the young man named Zanu who spoke like a spring breeze in front of him, and his originally worried mood instantly calmed down. Pulling the boy's fair and slender hand, Oda Ichiro finally stood up. Afterwards, he still looked at the boy in surprise, especially the ice dragon still flying in the air behind the boy, and said a little dumbly, "Zan, little brother Zanu, then, that ice dragon." Hearing Oda Ichiro's words, the boy seemed to think of the giant in the sky, then turned around, and under Oda Ichiro's gaze, he stretched out his right hand. Just as Oda Ichiro was puzzled, he saw the boy suddenly shake his right hand. Immediately, the ice dragon that was originally above the merchant ship's head, which covered the sky, instantly turned into ice debris and dissipated in the sky. Looking at this miraculous scene, Oda Ichiro couldn't help but grow his mouth and was speechless in shock. At this time, the boy turned around again, looked at Ichiro Oda with a smile, and said with a smile, "I wonder if you can come with us. Of course, as a reward, when we encounter pirates or some other problems that you can't solve, we can solve it, how about it?" Hearing the boy's words, Oda Ichiro didn't care about being shocked, and quickly said in surprise, of course, brother Zanu, and this Miss Kuina, I am the captain of this ship, Ichiro Oda, I am very honored to be able to help the two of you. I will go and instruct the chef to prepare a welcome banquet for the two of you." Saying that, Oda Ichiro looked at the two boys and girls in front of him with some anticipation. Above the sea, there will always be pirates. And every time I encounter these pirates, it is good to loot the goods. If you are unlucky and encounter some murderous guys, you will not be able to save your life. Therefore, if you can make friends with such strong peers, these problems can be solved. That's why Oda Ichiro was so excited after hearing the boy's words, and even planned to hold a banquet to welcome the two boys and girls in front of him. Time returns to the present. Beside the fence at the front of the merchant ship, Kuina with long navy blue hair up to the waist, holding Minazuki in his hand, glanced at the door of the cabin, all eyes filled with peach heart, desperately towards the girls, young women, even and a few aunties. He couldn't help turning his head and looked at Zanu who was looking out at the sea with a half-smile, and laughed. "I didn't expect you to be so popular with women. Yo, look, how many other aunts are attracted to you, Zanu." Zanu smiled helplessly, then turned to look at Kuina and said with a smile, "Isn't it with you, Kuina? You came out with me, didn't you just stop these wild bees and butterflies?" Hearing Zanu's words, Kuina immediately blushed slightly, stared at Zanu angrily, and said, "Humph, less stinky. I came out this time, but to fulfill my dream. The throne of the world's greatest swordsman. I will definitely get it before Zoro goes to sea. When the time comes, let that kid Zoro follow my footsteps, hum hum." At the end of the speech, Kuina deliberately dropped two words in an attempt to change the subject. However, Zanu, who is familiar with Kuina, immediately saw Kuina's brief topic-changing skills, but Zanu didn't dismantle it. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully, and then said to himself, "So that's the case, then, my dream of building a big crystal palace might just happen to be realized." However, before Zanu's words were finished, Kuina stared directly at Zanu and said in a low voice, "You dare." Saying that, Kuina weighed Minazuki in her hands, and her beautiful eyes looked at something on Zanu's body. However, even though she said this, Kuina knew in her heart that with Zanu's conditions, even if Zanu didn't take the initiative to provoke him in the future, countless girls would rush towards this guy. After all, no one knows better than me how good my brother is. Appearance, handsome mess. Temperament, like an emperor's noble temperament exudes invisibly. Even standing still like that is always the most eye-catching presence in the crowd. Character, always so gentle. Strength, even now that he already has swordsmanship that surpasses the great swordsman, plus a series of skills such as Kido, white hits, shunpo, etc. inherited from the hero Unohana Retsu, it cannot force Zanu's true strength. The only downside might be the identity. But in this sea, the most worthless thing is identity. Even the legendary nobles of the world, wouldn't they die with a knife? Yes, under the influence of Zanu, the current Kuina has also cultivated a life philosophy of respecting the strong, and is not interested in the so-called nobles. Kuina thought about it in her heart, and found that when she was looking for a younger brother, she didn't seem to find any shortcomings at all. Such a perfect young man, would the girl who is pregnant with Spring see it or not? Yourself, isn't it just an example? Otherwise, when I heard this guy call my name before, I would subconsciously be called, sister, why would I ignore it now? Thinking of this, Kuina glanced at Zanu again, and couldn't help whispering. Humph, can't you be a little ugly? Why are you so handsome? Zanu couldn't hear Kuina's muttering clearly, so he could not help looking at Kuina with some doubts. Just when he was about to ask, he suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the cabin. Zanu and Kuina couldn't help but look in the direction of the voice. I happened to see a yellow-haired young man in a black suit push the Captain Oda Ichiro to the ground, and then he arrogantly adjusted the bow on his neck, and glanced disdainfully around him. The crew members who dared to act in any other way had a look of enjoyment on their faces. Especially seeing the eyes of everyone around him staring at him at this time, the young man's face even showed a morbid sense of satisfaction. This young man is the nobleman of the Goya kingdom who was clamoring to turn other people's family into slaves, Baron Allen. A few minutes ago, Allen, who had grabbed a lifebuoy from a civilian who dared not to speak, was about to jump into the sea to escape. When he saw the captain suddenly come to the hall, he explained that everything just now was just what the two strong men wanted. After the misunderstanding caused by the boat ride, Allen had a little hatred for the two so-called strong men, who made him so embarrassed and made a fool of himself. Who is he? The whole East Blue is the most famous and cleanest. Even the rumored world noble Celestial Dragons is the noble baron of Goya Kingdom who came to watch. A noble existence that all ordinary pariahs will salute when they meet. There was such a big scandal just now. How could this not make Allen hold grudges? When Allen was angry, he suddenly heard a commotion at the entrance of the hall. Especially when watching those women desperately looking out the door one by one, Allen was even more jealous, and his angry eyes were spitting fire. He, Lord Allen, is the most honorable person on this ship. It is also the person who should be looked up to by other pariahs. But what's going on now? The extremely atmosphere of Allen couldn't help but walk towards the door, but he wanted to see who actually dared to steal his limelight. As soon as he came to the door, Allen heard other people talking. It turns out that those two are the strong men that the captain said. That boy is really young and handsome. Yes, and that little girl, she's so pretty. Quote. Allen didn't listen to other discussions because he already knew the identity of his target. Humph, powerhouse, let me see what kind of person the so-called powerhouse is. Thinking like this, Allen pushed away the person standing in front of him, ignoring the angry gaze of that person, and looked directly at the two white figures on the deck. When he saw Kuina for the first time, he was immediately attracted by Kuina's beauty, and his eyes instantly filled with endless lewdness. So beautiful, I didn't expect to encounter a beauty of this level when I came out this time. Ha ha ha, she is mine, she can only be mine. When he was thinking this way, Allen's eyes were also on Zanu next to Kuina. Especially seeing Zanu's incomparably handsome face and the aristocratic temperament exuding from the inside out. Presumably with Zanu, Allen suddenly felt that he, a real nobleman, had become a turtle. This can't help but make Allen's jealousy of Zanu even more. Staring at Zanu, Alan rolled his eyes, and suddenly thought of a wonderful attention. I remember that Countess Charlie seems to like this little white face. If I give this little white face to the Countess, then, he. Thinking of this, Alan pushed aside the Captain Oda Ichiro, who was blocking the door. After tidying up his suit and bow, he walked out of the door with confidence and walked towards Zanu and Kuina. As for Zanu and Kuina, who are the powerhouses in those populations? Do not make jokes. How can there be such a young strong man? Besides, the strong ones are not just the dogs raised by their nobles that can bite people. When Lord Celestial Dragons came to visit Goa Kingdom last time, there were quite a few strong people around them, but wouldn't they all obey Lord Celestial Dragon's orders like obedient dogs? It was with this thought in mind that Alan walked towards Zanu and Kuina with a confident, even conceited smile. At the entrance of the hall, everyone watched Aaron walking towards Zanu, and the two of them, each of them could not help but regret. Hey, what a good couple, today looks like it's going to be bad. Yeah, Baron Alan of Goya Kingdom, that lewd reputation has long been spread in this sea area. I heard that this guy was staring at a beautiful girl, and he didn't escape from his palm. Conspiracy, military oppression, all kinds of means that can be used and can't be used, all of which have been taken out by this guy. Countless families or the family was ruined by this guy. Can no one stop it? How to stop it? That is a nobleman appointed by the Goya Kingdom, protected by the world government and marine. If anyone moves him, he will become Marine's wanted criminal in a few days. In that case, these two are afraid. Hey. Captain Oda Ichiro listened to the chatter of the people around him, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help evoking a sneer. Brother Zanu and Miss Kuina are not ordinary people who have no resistance. If you want to bully them, it's just courting death. He walks on the sea all the year round, and sometimes even goes to the Grand Line, but he knows that in the eyes of the real powerhouse, the nobles of a mere kingdom are no different from an ant. There are even many strong people who have the strength to destroy a country by one person. Although he can't tell how strong Zanu is, Miss Kuina's sharp aura is definitely the strongest existence he has ever seen in most of his life. Ichiro Oda looked at Ellen's back as if he was looking at a dead man. At this time, Alan had come to Zanu and Kuina, looked at them proudly, and said, "Introduce myself, I am the most famous Baron of the Goya Kingdom in East Blue, Baron Alan." Saying that, Alan's eyes were fixed on the faces of Zanu and Kuina, wanting to see their fearful, frightened expressions. However, after a few seconds, Kuina was still expressionless, as if watching has been springing insects. And Zanu, this is a half smile, no one knows what he is thinking. Seeing the attitudes of the two, Alan was furious. But thinking of his goal, Alan still held back his anger and continued. "Woman, your name is Kuina, right? Congratulations, you have been spotted by the great and distinguished Lord Alan, and you can follow me in the future. Woman, your name is Kuina, isn't it? Congratulations, you have been spotted by the great and distinguished Baron Alan. You can follow me in the future." After speaking, Alan turned his gaze to Zanu, and said contemptuously, "As for you, I, Lord Alan, will introduce you to an earl's mansion. At that time, you will not have to worry about eating and drinking in the future. Thanks to the great Alan." When Alan was talking nonsense, a slender and fair hand suddenly stretched out, directly pinched Alan's neck, and lifted Alan volley. The owner of this hand is Zanu. Looking at Aaron, who was holding the air in his hands with disgust, Zanu said lightly. Enough said. Alan, who was picked up by his neck, was congested and flushed after a while. He didn't seem to have thought that someone would dare to do it to himself in an open and above-board manner. At first, Alan was even a little stunned. It wasn't until he slowly exhaled that it became a bit difficult, and Alan, who had just reacted, immediately looked at the calm Zanu with a grim face and shouted. "Bold, do you untouchable know what you are doing? I am the nobleman of the most famous Goa Kingdom in East Blue. Does the Goa Kingdom know? It is the great kingdom that the legendary celestial dragons came to visit. And as a nobleman of the Goya Kingdom, I am under the protection of the world government and marine. How dare you, a pariah, attack me? Just wait for the entire marine to be wanted." However, feeling that his neck was being squeezed tighter and tighter, Alan finally comforted him with a generous, "Of course, if you kneel at my feet now, and at the same time dedicate the woman beside you to %, Suddenly, Alan felt the hand pinching his neck so hard that he couldn't even make a sound. Cannot help but look anxious. The limbs struggled hard. Until this moment, looking at the young man in front of him who was still flat-faced, with the same expressionless face as the one beside him, as if looking at a spring bug looking at his own girl, Alan was finally sure that the pair of men and women in front of him were real. Don't take your own threats seriously. At the same time, Alan was also really scared until this moment. At this time, the words of the girl in front of him made Alan completely desperate. Noble, what is that? The crew members and ordinary tourists in the hall who have been watching the development of the situation, watching that arrogant kingdom rules are actually held in the air by their necks, each one of them grows their mouths in surprise and their faces are full of disbelief. How dare he? That's a noble. It's over, this boy and the girl next to him are completely over. Hey, young people are easy to be impulsive. If you are obedient, you can at least save your life in the future. Now, in a few days, you will be wanted by Marine, right? Yes, how can nobles be harmed by us commoners? At this time, the captain Oda Ichiro, who had stood up with the help of the crew, listened to the discussion of the people behind him, and sneered disdainfully in his heart. So you deserve to be bullied by these nobles all your life. You can only be a commoner all your life. At this moment, on the sea in the distance, there was a sudden roar. Boom. Before anyone else could react, the whole ship suddenly seemed to be hit by some huge force and shook violently. At this moment, everyone panicked again. What's wrong? What happened again? The sound just now seems to be the sound of shelling. Who is attacking us? Could it be? The next moment, the lookout on the ship suddenly shouted in panic. Captain, it's the Ironclaw pirates. The Ironclaw pirates were attacking us just now. They're chasing us now. Ichiro Oda lost his voice when he heard the call of the watchman. Ironclaw pirates. The pirate group led by Ironclaw Austin, who was offered a bounty of 2 million Baileys by Marine. This situation is not good. In East Blue, known as the weakest sea, a pirate with a bounty of 2 million Bailey is considered a big pirate. With the defensive power on the merchant ship, it is impossible to stop the attack of the Ironclaw pirates. Thinking of this, Oda Ichiro's eyes instantly turned to the pair of boys and girls on the deck. Perhaps, only they can save this ship, right? In the cabin, the civilians and tourists who also heard the shouting of the watchmen were really panicked at this moment. They still know something about the reputation of the Ironclaw pirates. According to legend, there has never been a living person on any merchant ship encountered by the Ironclaw pirates. Thinking of the scene after they were about to be caught by these legendary evil ghosts, many people were so frightened that they cried out. About 10 nautical miles away from the merchant ship, 3 fast ships are galloping towards the merchant ship. On a pirate ship in the center, a middle-aged man with a sharp iron claw on his right hand sat on a tall seat, playing with the 2 large iron balls in his hands, his face full of bloodthirsty. Looking at the approaching merchant ships, he shouted, "Little ones, the knock on the door just now was a little loud. Give the owner of that ship a few loud ones." Hearing the order of his own captain, nearly 200 pirates on the 3 pirate ships responded excitedly and loudly at the same time. "Yes, follow your orders, boss. This time, the owners of that ship will definitely hear the knock on the door of our Ironclaw pirates." Ha ha ha. While speaking, the 3 pirate ships roared, and dozens of lead bullets were fired towards the merchant ship. At the same time, on the pirate ship in the middle, a bearded pirate wearing a black rubber hat looked at Austin the Ironclaw and said with a grin, "Captain, this time, are we still following the old rules?" Hearing this, Ironclaw Austin also laughed loudly. His eyes were full of bloodthirsty. Just as he was about to speak, he saw a sudden flash of purple light in the sky. Immediately afterwards, all the lead bullets that were launched suddenly exploded in the sky. What happened? Austin was a little furious for a while. At the same time, on the deck of the merchant ship, Kuina slowly retracted her Zanpakudo Minazuki into the scabbard as if nothing had happened. However, at this time, Zanu was still strangling his neck. His face was purple, but Aaron, who had not yet died, looked at Kuina, full of fear. Is this a weak girl? Just a monster? Alan just watched helplessly. When so many lead bullets were about to hit the merchant ship, the female monster just pulled out the sword in her hand and slashed at the void without looking at it. Those dozens of lead bullets just exploded like that. Not to mention the terrified and trembling Eren, Zanu was not at all surprised by what Kuina did just now. Instead, he turned his head and glanced at the door of the cabin, just in time to see himself looking at him expectantly. The captain of the two, Ichiro Oda. Zanu nodded slightly. Then he looked at Kuina and said with a relaxed smile, "Kina, since we promised the captain to help him deal with the pirates along the way, then this time, it's up to you." Kuina also had no objection, nodded, pulled out Zanpakuto again, and turned to look at the 3 pirate ships that were chasing in the distance. Just when he was about to take action, Zanu suddenly stopped him. Etc. Kuina turned her head and looked at Zanu in confusion. At this time, Zanu raised Eren in his hand and said to Kuina, "I almost forgot, I still have a piece of garbage in my hand, let's solve it together later." After speaking, Zanu kindly glanced at Alan in his hand. And it was this sight that made Alan tremble, and shouted hoarsely, "Stop, don't." However, Zanu ignored Alan's words and directly threw Alan's body in the direction of the 3 pirate ships with a slight force on his arm. No, there was only a shrill cry left in the air, and then Kuina next to Zanu swung down with a knife. Immediately, 4 lavender/waves were cut out from Zanpakuto in Kuina's hands, and 4 huge ravines appeared on the sea in an instant. The entire sea has been chopped off. Whether it was the 3 pirate ships or Eren, who was flying upside down, before they could react, they were directly concentrated by the lavender/wave and divided into 2. After the /wave was resolved as a target, it did not dissipate immediately, but continued to shoot further away, leaving 4 huge ravines in the sea with a length of several kilometers. Bottomless, even the sea water could not fill up these 4 ravines for a period of time. This is the power of a great swordsman level tactic. At the same time, it is only a swordsmanship of the great swordsman level. And this scene was also seen by the civilians, tourists and crew members lying on the cabin window. In an instant, the whole ship was quiet. Not the slightest sound. Needle drop can be heard. Everyone glanced in horror at the sword-wielding girl who was still on the deck, and then returned to their respective houses without saying a word, daring not to say anything for fear of being stabbed by the girl. However, at the same time, there were also some people who responded and dialed the phone bug without a trace. At this time, the shocked Captain Oda Ichiro, who opened his mouth again, came back to his senses again. At the same time, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although he expected that this girl named Kuina would be very strong, he did not expect that it would be so strong. It's as strong as a monster. The same monster as the boy beside her. Regarding what happened before, neither Zanu nor Kuina cared at all, and they still talked and laughed. At this moment, Captain Oda Ichiro walked over from the door of the cabin hull with a large tray full of food. Zanu looked at Ichiro Oda, who came over and smiled. "It's the trouble, Mr. Captain." Ichiro Oda walked in front of the two and placed the tray on the sturdy railing before waving his hand at Zanu with a wry smile, saying, "Brother Zanu is joking. I haven't thanked Brother Zanu and Miss Kuina for their life-saving grace, just some food, why bother?" Saying that, Oda Ichiro took a step back and bowed deeply to Zanu and Kuina. "Seriously, I would like to express my thanks to you both on behalf of all the crew on board, and thank you for saving all of our lives from the pirates." Taking the fork in the tray and picking up a piece of chocolate dessert, Kuina watched Oda Ichiro thank him so earnestly. A smile appeared on his cold and beautiful face, and his affection for the captain also increased a lot. After all, although solving the pirates was agreed from the beginning, Kuina is also bound to solve it. But to be thanked so earnestly afterwards, which undoubtedly made people feel a sense of respect, not an employment relationship. Zanu picked up a bottle of wine in the tray, and after reaching a little in the glass for Kuina, also for Kuina. "Got some wine by myself." When he picked up the wine glass and shook it gently, Zanu looked at Ichiro Oda with a half smile, and suddenly said, "Mr. Captain, thank you just now on behalf of yourself and your crew." Hearing this, Oda couldn't help but be slightly taken aback, and then the wry smile on his face became even worse. He never thought that Zanu, a young man who looked so young, would directly seize the loophole in his own words. Wiping the cold sweat that didn't exist on his forehead, Ichiro Oda took off the round glasses on his left eye. Then he looked at Zanu with a wry smile and said, "Yes, all I can represent is myself and my crew. As for other people, I don't have that qualification, and those people are actually. Speaking of which, Ichiro Oda couldn't go on, or he knew that out of courtesy, he shouldn't actually say the next words. Yeah, in other words, when he was thanking him just now, he shouldn't have said things like, representing himself and the crew. However, looking at the sea behind Zanu's brother Kuina and the two, which was gradually calming down until now, Oda Ichiro suddenly felt that he did not regret the apology just now. Although Oda Ichiro didn't continue to speak, Zanu did shake the wine in his hand, followed Oda Ichiro's words with a smile, and said, "What the captain wanted to say just now is that those people may not actually thank me and Kuina, right?" Hearing Zanu's words, Kuina, who was sipping the dessert, frowned slightly, looked at Zanu in confusion, and asked in confusion, "Zanu, why do you say that? Didn't we save their lives from the pirates? Why don't they thank us?" At this moment, Oda Ichiro suddenly said, "Yeah, although not all, but there are indeed many people who will not thank Miss Kuina for helping." Saying that, Oda Ichiro turned slightly to reveal the situation at the entrance of the hall. Zanu watched the exchange between Oda Ichiro and Kuina with great interest. He suddenly felt that this captain is indeed a very interesting person. And Kuina followed Oda Ichiro's sign and looked towards the entrance of the hall, only to find that there was no one at the entrance, and even through the entrance, you could see the original lively hall, and now there are only some services dressed in crew costumes. People are busy. Huh, where are their people? Wasn't it quite lively just now? Now that the pirates have been dealt with by me, why are they all gone? Isn't it time to celebrate? After hearing Kuina's words, Ichiro Oda is now sure that this girl is definitely a newbie who is going to see for the first time. Miss Kuina, in fact, if you just killed the pirates just now, the scene at the moment is exactly as you said, and the celebration party begins. However, you also dealt with a noble of the kingdom at the same time. In their eyes, you have become a murderous demon. In their opinion, with such a powerful force, but without any scruples against a nobleman, in the same way, you may also do something against them. Even though everyone knows that the Alan noble is heinous. Even if everyone has witnessed everything that happened just now. In their perception, you and Brother Zanu should obey the nobles. This is the best result. After that, they will only feel sorry for you and Brother Zanu. However, once you rebel against the nobles, or even kill the nobles, in their view, such behavior is so outrageous, so heinous. What East Blue is a symbol of peace. This is a sick world. At the end of the speech, Oda Ichiro directly yelled. His face was washed with tears at some point, and his eyes were full of anger and self-deprecation. What East Blue is a symbol of peace. This is a sick world. Looking at the sudden outbreak of Oda Ichiro, U-shaped Dark Moon and Kuina met at a glance. The tacit understanding they had cultivated over the past 18 years allowed both parties to understand the meaning in each other's eyes at the same time. Mr. Captain, it seems that he is also a person with a story. However, the two of them were very tacit and did not speak, and just looked at Ichiro Oda. After a while, Oda Ichiro came back to his senses. He was a little embarrassed and took out a white handkerchief to wipe the tears from his face. Afterwards, it was refolded, which was very cherished, and solemnly put into the pocket of the suit. Zanu has sharp eyes. When Oda Ichiro was wiping away his tears, he glanced at an orchid pattern on a white handkerchief. After putting away the handkerchief, Oda Ichiro apologized. "Sorry, I just thought of some past events, and I lost my temper for a while. I also ask Brother Zanu and Miss Kuina not to take offense." Seeing this, Kuina also knew that what Oda Ichiro called the past was not a good memory, so he nodded rationally, and told Oda Ichiro about it directly, saying, "Let's continue with the previous topic. Although what you said just now seems to explain your previous thank you behavior, my intuition tells me that there should be something you haven't said yet, right? Especially after listening to your explanation just now, I suddenly feel that your initial thanks, Captain, seems to have a sense of shirking responsibility. What are you afraid of?" Hearing Kuina's words, Zanu nodded secretly with some relief. This girl, her head is turning so fast. And Ichiro Oda also looked at Kuina in surprise, and also noticed Zanu nodding secretly when he looked at Kuina. I couldn't help but sighed again in my heart. Where the hell is this pair of monsters from? Thinking so in my heart, Oda Ichiro explained with a wry smile in reality. I didn't expect that Miss Kuina would see it out. Miss Kuina is really smart. Kuina didn't care about Oda Ichiro's praise. And seeing this scene in Oda Ichiro's eyes, he couldn't help but value Kuina more. So young, not only has such a monster-like power, but also such a firm heart. It seems that soon, the name of Miss Kuina will be heard on this sea. Thinking of this, Oda Ichiro glanced at Zanu and continued in his heart. However, Zanu is the one who hides the deepest, and he will surely show endless brilliance in the future. There are so many things in his mind, but in reality, Oda Ichiro just paused for a while, then continued the previous topic and said frankly. I was really afraid just now, and the people I was afraid of were also Miss Kuina and brother Zanu. Hearing Oda Ichiro's words, Kuina's beautiful brows slightly wrinkled, and she said a little unhappily. Are you also the same as those people in your mouth? Unexpectedly, when Oda Ichiro heard Kuina's words, he waved his hands and shook his head in denial. No, it's not like that. Miss Kuina, the reason why I'm afraid is actually related to Baron Ellen who just died. Quote. In order to avoid Kuina's misunderstanding, Oda Ichiro quickly went on to say. As Baron Allen himself said, he is an aristocrat of the Goya kingdom and is sheltered by the Marine and the world government. Killing him, although it won't be as serious as he said before, will indeed be regarded as a pirate, wanted by Marine and the world government. Hearing this, Kuina said subconsciously. But, all the pirates have died just now, what about Marine and the world government? Having said this, Kuina just reacted, looking at the direction of the cabin with a complicated expression. This time, Kuina already understood the fear in Oda Ichiro's heart. At this time, Oda Ichiro's words also confirmed Kuina's conjecture. It seems that Miss Kuina has figured it out. Yes, it is some of them who will report to Marine and the others. As I said before, although Miss Kuina, you have saved the lives of everyone on our ship, most people will not accept your love, and coupled with some interests, I believe that at this moment you and Zan brother Yu's photo has been placed on East Blue Marine's desk. Maybe in a day or two, the wanted notices for you and Zanu will be scattered all over the sea. And I was worried that you and brother Zanu might be annoyed and implicated in the crew members. That's why I thank you and brother Zanu just now. However, I can assure Miss Kuina and brother Zanu that among those people, there is absolutely no crew member of mine. Please, brother Zanu, you must believe me. Having said that, Oda Ichiro bowed deeply to Zanu and Kuina again, asking for their trust. After a while, Zanu watched Oda Ichiro walk back into the cabin and resumed his busyness, smiled and said. Mr. Captain is an interesting man. Although there is no strength, whether it is knowledge, heart, or wisdom, it is one of the rare types in this sea. Mr. Captain must have seen big scenes when he was young. However, Zanu's words did not get a response from Kuina. Zanu turned his head curiously and saw Kuina who was frowning and puzzled. Zanu understands that Kuina is still confused by what Ichiro Oda said earlier. Just when I was about to solve it, I saw Kuina suddenly raised her head and looked at herself. Zanu, what are you talking about with these people on board in the Marine? Even though we saved their lives, they are afraid of us because I killed a noble scumbag who came to trouble us with bad things. They might even report us to Marine as the captain said. And those Marines, aren't they wearing the coats of justice? Why not only didn't they arrest scumbags like Alan, but protected them instead? Even because of this, is it possible to want us? Is it true that in such a situation, it is only right for us to be bullied by such scumbags? Looking at Kuina, whose face was wrinkled tightly at this time, full of confusion, puzzlement, and even as if his outlook on life had been impacted, Kuina, who was eager to find the answer. Zanu was also stunned for a moment. His eyes became serious, but the next moment, Zanu exaggeratedly said as if joking. Perhaps, as Mr. Captain said, this is a sick world. I don't know if I can give this world a few injections to cure the disease. If it really doesn't work, then you need that scalpel to do the surgery. But, where should the surgery be? Well, this is a question worth thinking about. Having said that, Zanu frowned, as if he was really thinking about the possibility of this matter. Looking at Zanu's funny way of speaking, Kuina couldn't hold back for a while, and laughed softly. He, Zanu, you fool, don't do such a funny thing. Your son's image is about to fall to the ground. Looking at the smiling Kuina, who seemed to have come out of the horns just now. Zanu also smiled and stopped his funny behavior. After taking a sip of the wine from the wine glass in his hand, Zanu leaned back against the railing, looked up at the blue sky, and said with a light smile, "Actually, it's hard for me to understand the world, especially the so-called justice in the world." Speaking of which, Zanu's mind was thinking of the O'Hara incident, the fish-man tiger saving the slave incident, and Sabayati archipelago watching the slave trade fair under Marine's eyelids. Hearing Zanu's emotion, Kuina looked at Zanu with some amusing and said, "Why, when you were in the dojo in the past, didn't you always claim to know everything about this world? Why is there still something you don't understand now?" Hearing Kuina's teasing, Zanu straightened up and retorted, "No, I really know everything about this world. As for the emotion just now, it's just that I put myself into the identity of some people to think, and it is naturally difficult to understand their thoughts. After all, the human heart is still separated by a layer of belly. One person can never fully understand another person's thoughts. As for your previous question, Kuina, instead of letting me tell you the answer, it's better for you to find the answer on your next sea voyage. After all, the sea is so big, in addition to being the world's largest swordsman, you also need to find something interesting to do, don't you?" Hearing Zanu's suggestion, Kuina nodded in agreement with Zanu's words, and began to enjoy the food again. "Speaking of another thing, by the way, I heard from the captain just now that according to the speed of this ship, we will be able to reach the nearest place called Orange Town in 2 days. Do you want to go up there to find a new inheritor? I remember you before going to sea, he said that this time he came out to find a new inheritor." Hearing this, Zanu shook the glass again and laughed. "Looking for a new inheritor is certain, but before that, we must first find a ship that can carry us temporarily, and find a good navigator. Only in this way can we truly begin our voyage." When talking about the navigator, Zanu's mind instantly came to a girl with orange hair. "I don't know where this little orange cat is now." On the other hand, what Oda Ichiro guessed has already happened. However, the photos of Zanu and Kuina did not appear in the East Blue Marine Base at this moment, but directly in Marineford, Naval Headquarters, on the table of Marine Marshal Sengoku. At this moment, Sengoku, with an explosive hairstyle, a seagull hat, and a braided beard, looked at the photo of Kuina in his hand, and frowned tightly. "It's incredible that a little girl at such a young age is already a great swordsman." Having said that, when he picked up another photo on the desk, especially when he looked at the photo, the 4,000s of meters long and unfathomable ravines on the sea, he had to admit it. This is indeed the power of the great swordsman. Crack clap. Sengoku's eyes twitched, resisting the anger that was about to erupt, turned his head to look at the wrinkled, gray-haired crane vice-admiral sitting on one side of the chair, and asked, "Xiaohei, you are the most self-sufficient person among us Marines. What do you think about this matter?" Crack clap. On Sengoku's forehead, countless, characters popped out one after another. Bang. Sengoku slapped his hands on the table fiercely, turned his head and shouted loudly at Garp, who was focused on fighting with Senbei. "Garp, this is my office. I asked you to come and analyze the situation for me. I didn't tell you to eat Senbei here. Did you hear that, old fool?" Looking at the angry Sengoku, Garp with short white hair buttoned his booger and said indifferently, "Isn't this kind of thing involving you and Xiaohei? The old man is just in charge of the battle." With that said, Garp flicked the booger off his fingers, picked up the bag containing the senbei again, and once again planned to start a fight with the senbei, while complaining in a low voice. "How many did you eat just now? 1,642. Or 1,643? I can't remember exactly. It's all my fault for this fool, Sengoku. I forgot the exact number. Forget it, let's start over." Behind the desk, Sengoku wiped away the booger that just flew to his face with a livid face, and the veins on his forehead jumped violently. And at this moment, Garp's whispers drifted into Sengoku's ears. At this moment, Sengoku couldn't bear it any longer. He stood up with a direct touch, and after a burst of golden light flickered on his body, he turned into a big Buddha. The old man can't take it anymore. Old man Garp, die for the old man. Big Buddha, shockwave. Garp's, eat the number of senbei in one go, was interrupted again, and he was also displeased, so when he saw Sengoku's big move directly, he waved his fist and rushed up in the same annoyance. Seeing that these two old fools actually made a move here, Vice Admiral was also angry. You two old fellows, are you going to tear down naval headquarters? Wash the fruit, wash it. In an instant, Sengoku and Garp, who were about to dry, seemed to be two pieces of clothes hanging in the air to dry. You two, let's reflect on yourself now. On the training ground below, many recruits heard Sengoku's roar and the loud explosion sound. They couldn't help holding the weapons in their hands and said in shock. What's the matter? Did a pirate come in? Yeah, it seemed to be the call of the marshal just now. With that pirate so bold, how dare he hope for the marshal here? Let's go to support Marshal Sengoku. Never let this pirate succeed. Quote. At this time, some veterans persuaded these recruits to calmly say, don't worry, there are no pirates, this is Marshal Sengoku and Garp Vice Admiral discussing. Ha ha ha, watching these recruits reminds me of when I first came here. This time it's going to end soon. It seems that Vice Admiral made the shot. Quote. After a few minutes, Sengoku, who was sitting behind the desk, and Garp, who was sitting on the bench, were both more honest. Cough cough. Sengoku coughed twice, picked up the information on the table again, and threw it to Vice Admiral Suru, saying, Xiaohei, take a look at the information just passed on from the East Blue branch, and analyze it to see how we should solve it. Crane Vice Admiral took the information and took a closer look, but when he saw Kuina's strength and the somewhat excessive photo of the young man, he couldn't help showing a surprised look on his face. After reading all the cause and effect, Vice Admiral the Crane passed the information in his hand to Garp next to him, looked at Garp and asked, Garp, when you were in East Blue, did you hear the little girl named Kuina? Or the name of the boy named Zanu next to Kuina? When Garp heard the question from Vice Admiral of Crane, he casually replied while browsing the information in his hand. Never heard of it at all. And this, in fact, does not blame Garp. First of all, Seymour Jaji Village, in the incomparably wide East Blue, was originally just a small village in a small country with no one's own eyes. Who would care about such a small village other than looking for it? I'm afraid it's hard to even know the name. Second, since Kuina followed Zanu to the training center at the beach in the back of the mountain for training 8 years ago, he has basically stopped showing up in the dojo. 8 years is enough to kill a lot of memories. It is no exaggeration to say that in the entire Seymour Jaji village, apart from Koshiro and Zoro, who are closest to Zanu's brother Kuina, basically no one remembers the names Zanu and Kuina. After reviewing all the information, Garp couldn't help patting his thighs and said happily looking at Kuina's photo. This little girl is doing beautifully. As early as East Blue, I heard that this noble scumbag named Ellen does all kinds of evil. The old man has long wanted to throw this guy into prison, but every time he goes back, he will be angry with my lovely unfortunate grandson, forgotten. I didn't expect that this girl would actually do this for the old man, and she actually killed it. Not bad. Also, at such a young age, she is already a great swordsman, and she is a female great swordsman that she has never heard of. Give me East Blue a face. Who would dare to say that we East Blue are the weakest sea? Ha ha ha. Garp. Sengoku glanced at Garp in dissatisfaction, then looked at Suru Vice Admiral, and asked, Xiaohei, what do you think we should do with this matter? After all, the two parties involved in this incident are the nobles of the kingdom, and the other is such a young female great swordsman. Crane Vice Admiral heard the words, his eyes flashed with wisdom, and analyzed. Actually, we Marine have no right to choose. If only we Marine knew about this matter at the beginning, we could choose to block the news and try our best to suppress this matter. After all, there is such a young female great swordsman enemy, which is a good thing for us Marine. Not a good thing. At such a young age, she already possesses the strength of a great swordsman. Of course, I don't need to say much about the talent of this little girl named Kuina. Even, for her ability to become the world's #1 swordsman in the future, she will pull Hawkeye from that throne. I'm not surprised to go down. If possible, I would prefer to pull her into our marine. But, it's too late now. When this information appears here, it means that the people on that ship have also passed the information to the Goa Kingdom. This kind of opportunity to earn double or even more information money is absolutely based on the slickness of those people. We'll do it. As for what kind of guys most of the kingdom's nobles are, I don't need to say more. They will definitely ask our marine to arrest Kuina and that Zanu. However, when the world government invited the kingdoms of these countries to join the world government alliance, they promised these things. Of course, if we change it to a normal kingdom, we don't really need to pay attention, but it is this Goya kingdom. I heard that Chalmik and the king of Goya kingdom. While Crane was analyzing, a special phone worm suddenly rang on Sengoku's desk. Blublu. Seeing this, Crane stopped analyzing, because she recognized that this was a phone bug contacting world government. Sengoku picked up the phone bug at this time and said, Mosamoxi. Yes, okay, promise to complete the mission. Watching the phone bug close his eyes, Sengoku hung up the phone bug, looked up at the crane, and said helplessly, Xiaohei, you are worthy of being our marine's think tank, and the situation is exactly the same as your analysis. The king of Goa kingdom promised Saint Charmik some favors and asked Saint Charmik to help urge the world government to arrest the prisoners. The call just now was specially called by the 5 elders, asking us to arrest these 2 prisoners as soon as possible. After listening to Sengoku's words, Garp said with some dissatisfaction, Catch, how to catch it? Could it be that people can take the initiative to give their heads just by the mouths of those wastes? Hearing Garp's bold and rude words, Sengoku couldn't help shouting, Garp, watch your influence. However, at Sengoku's warning, Garp rolled his eyes indifferently, and then continued. What's wrong? The old man said something wrong. Now the big pirates are rampant, and civilians are being attacked by pirates all the time. Our marines are already in short supply. Sakazuki is now guarding New World, Kuzan is clearing the first half of the Grand Line, Pelusariro is staying at naval headquarters. Some of the top vice admirals in our marines are on duty. If you send some average vice admiral to arrest this little girl named Kuina, then you won't know who's arresting who. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.